Chapter 1229. Based on his understanding of Chu Yu, this was definitely not a mistake in remembering the prescription or putting in the wrong herbs. The only explanation was that Chu Yu had changed the prescription himself. What was this kid thinking? Elder Wanjing could not help but grind his teeth. Prescriptions of this level were all extremely complicated. Even if the dosage of one of the herbs was changed, it could lead to the failure of refining the pill, let alone changing the prescription and adding in several herbs. His lips trembled, and he swallowed the words in his throat with great difficulty. Now, he could only wait and see. Not only Elder Wanjing, but many other celestial physicians present also noticed that something was wrong. Chu Yu is planning to refine the energy cultivation pill, right? But why did he put in the green lotus seed just now? Not only that. The 4 herbs he put in just now were not in the prescription. I really don't know what he's trying to do. With Elder Wanjing and Senior Rong Xiu's personal guidance, logically speaking, he shouldn't have made such a low-level mistake, right? Look at his calm expression, it's obvious that he did it on purpose. Many people were puzzled. Regardless of their level, they all understood that the prescription could not be changed at will, let alone in such a tense battle. This Chu Yu's guts were truly abnormally big. Some people secretly shook their heads. The herbs used in the energy cultivation pill are extremely mild. When a cultivator takes it, it can strengthen their foundation, stabilize their mind, and benefit their qi. But the herbs that Chu Yu put in just now were extremely strong. Isn't this clearly going to destroy the pill? I think there's no point in continuing this competition. Unfortunately, I thought that his performance was good just now. But changing the prescription at the last minute is really a big mistake. Some people were whispering. Obviously, they had already lost hope in Chu Luyue. Hearing those words, Luo Shishir's heart hung in the air. Although she was not a celestial physician, she knew such common knowledge. As a 9th-grade celestial physician, Chu Yu definitely knew this, but why did he do it? Shuoxing shook his head regretfully. I think Chu Yu is going to lose this round. Luo Shishir pursed her lips. Perhaps he has his own ideas. He has just become a 9th-grade celestial physician. How can he change prescriptions at will? Although Shuoxing had always felt that Chu Yu was extremely talented, prescriptions were the foundation of a celestial physician's alchemy. Luo Shishir was silent for a moment and looked at the young man on the field. He stood tall and straight with one hand on top of the cauldron, controlling the temperature of the crimson flame inside. His other hand was still continuously putting in the remaining medicinal herbs. He looked calm and composed. I don't think he changed the prescription all of a sudden, Luo Shishir murmured. Looking at Chu Yu's smooth and natural appearance, it was as if he should have placed those medicinal herbs in. Shuoxing shrugged. That group of celestial physicians already said that he was refining the energy pill. There were many people who knew about this prescription, and they all said that Chu Yu had changed the prescription himself. Were they all wrong? Luo Shishir did not say anything else. Seeing her expression, Shuoxing's heart moved. He knew that she was worried about Chu Yu, so he comforted her. Sigh, you don't have to be too worried. After all, this is only the first round, and the opponent is a senior on the Azure Sky roll. Even if he loses, it won't be a big deal. After all, everyone can see that he is indeed a 9th-grade celestial physician. Luo Shishir wanted to say something, but stopped. Although she said that, there were many people in the academy who were waiting to see Chu Yu make a fool of himself. If he really lost, then, not only would he be ridiculed, but he would also implicate Senior Rong Xiu and Elder Wanjing. Would Chu Yu really not care about winning or losing this round? No matter what the others said, Chu Luyue did not take it to heart. The reason why she put in so many herbs was actually because she was following her own prescription. Yes, she had previously improved the prescription of the energy pill. Celestial Physician had perfected the prescription of every pill after countless attempts. The amount of each medicinal herb, the method of extraction, the control of the flame, and even the order in which it was put in had strict requirements. Once one made a mistake, it could lead to the failure of refining the pill. Of course, Chu Luiyue would not joke about such things. She waved her wrist lightly and finally put in the last medicinal herb for extraction. After all the medicinal herbs were prepared, it was time to form the pill. Chu Luiyue took a deep breath and urged the force in her body to surge out crazily. Boom! The flames in the cauldron suddenly rose. All the medicinal herbs were gathered together. The medicinal herbs he put in are too strong, and it is extremely difficult to merge with the other medicinal herbs. This time, I'm afraid he won't even be able to form the pill. A low murmur of discussion came from the crowd. Some people were already bored and turned to leave. However, at this moment, a violent collision sound suddenly came from Chu Luiyue's cauldron. Dong! The sound was loud and heavy, and it spread far and wide. Many people's expressions changed. Was this about to succeed? Sure enough, in the next moment, they saw a perfectly round pill appear in the red flames. A rich medicinal fragrance spread out. Elder Wanjing took a deep breath, and his eyes lit up. This aura. It was indeed the aura of a successfully refined origin-enhancing pill. Moreover, there was a different fragrance faintly hidden in it, which made the entire origin-enhancing pill smell even more fragrant. In an instant, the fragrance entered the lungs, and the whole body felt comfortable. His whole person seemed to be much more energetic. Elder Wanjing looked at Chu Luiyue with shining eyes. The medicinal herbs that he put in just now had clearly merged perfectly. Moreover, if he guessed correctly, the grade of this origin-enhancing pill was, bang! Tang Rui's pill was finally refined. He leaped up and grabbed the medicinal pill back. Put it into the jade box. Almost at the same time, Chu Luiyue also slammed her hand on the cauldron. A pill flew out. She waved her hand, and a red force flew out. In the blink of an eye, it transformed into a giant net, blocking the medicinal pill. Her feet moved slightly, and she also quickly kept the pill. The two of them, one in front and one behind, finished refining the pill. Tang Rui frowned slightly. Although he had successfully refined a 9th-grade pill, he didn't know why, but when he saw the calm expression of the young man opposite him, he faintly felt a trace of uneasiness in his heart. Even if he hadn't seen Chu Yu's pill with his own eyes, he knew that it was definitely not simple. To be able to successfully refine the pill after changing the prescription, it was already enough to explain too many problems. He hesitated for a moment, but still took the lead and handed over his pill. Elder Wanjing, please take a look. Elder Wanjing took his pill, and then looked at Chu Luiyue with a trace of excitement in his eyes. Chu Yu, yours. Chu Luiyue's fingers moved slightly, and she still handed over the item. Elder Wanjing's hands each had a jade box. He held his breath and opened Tang Rui's first. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Elder Wanjing took a deep breath and looked at Chu Luiyue. His eyes were filled with admiration and surprise. Middle 9th grade. He reached out and patted Chu Luiyue on the shoulder. Chu you, very good. Originally, he only wanted to let those people see how outstanding his disciple was. But he did not expect that Chu Yu's performance was actually so outstanding. It was many times better than what he had expected. He carefully looked at the 2 medicinal pills again, and then frowned slightly. His expression seemed to be somewhat conflicted. The 2 of you have refined pills of the same grade, and the quality is equally matched. This match is considered a draw. Everyone was in an uproar. A draw. Didn't that prove that Chu Yu did indeed have the strength to ascend the Azure Sky rankings? But Tang Rui was ranked 100. Between the two of them, only one could ascend. Of course, according to the strength that they had displayed, they should be able to be ranked at the front. But then, they would have to continue to challenge higher ranks. Tang Rui suddenly cupped his hands towards Chu Luiyue and chuckled. This Azure Sky ranking should have been ascended by junior brother Chu Yu. Although I refined pills of the same grade as junior brother Chu Yu, junior brother Chu Yu is only 16 years old. Just this point alone has already surpassed me by too much. Everyone had different expressions, but no one refuted. Because this was one of the rules of the ascension rankings. If the two of them were of equal strength, then the younger one would be ranked at the front. Chu Yu had sufficient confidence to ascend the Azure Sky rankings. Elder Wanjing actually didn't care much about whether Chu Luiyue could ascend the Azure Sky rankings or not. In any case, everything that he had displayed was enough to prove his excellence. This was already enough. He thought in his heart. Actually, from the beginning, he shouldn't have treated ascending the Azure Sky rankings as the goal of testing Chu Yu. With this child's natural talent, he should strive for a better ranking. Elder Wanjing glanced at Tang Rui with admiration in his eyes. Tang Rui, although you will fall out of the Azure Sky rankings after this match. But with your current strength, you can definitely continue to challenge those on it. Tang Rui nodded respectfully. This student understands. Elder Wanjing looked at Chu Luiyue and raised his chin with a smile. Kid, go. Place your hand on the Azure Sky rankings and inject a strand of origin power. Your name will appear. Chu Luiyue's fingers curled. The Azure Sky rankings, what's wrong? Seeing that Chu Luiyue didn't move for a long time, Elder Wanjing couldn't help but ask. Chu Luiyue shook his head and finally walked toward the celestial physician rankings. Countless gazes fell on her. Envy, jealousy, admiration, surprise, Chu Luiyue ignored them all. She stood still one step away from the celestial physician rankings. As long as she stretched out her hand and let her name appear, she would ascend the Azure Sky rankings. But, would her name really appear? Chu Luiyue held his breath and finally raised his hand. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1231. Her white palm slowly approached, and finally touched the black wall. Black and white, the two extreme colors contrasted against each other, and the names on the wall sparkled with light, almost forming a painting. Quiet and brilliant. Solemn and majestic. A cold touch came from her palm. Chu Luiyue's blood seemed to be boiling, flowing quickly in her limbs and bones. Her heart seemed to be tightly gripped by something. Everyone felt that she should be proud, joyful, and full of glory at this moment. But in reality, she was so nervous that she couldn't even hear the sounds around her. All she saw and heard was the honor roll of green clouds in front of her. Yesterday, she also stood here. That familiar fluctuation seemed to still be surging in her heart. She carefully moved a strand of force, and injected it into the honor roll of green clouds. Buzz! A faint buzzing sound suddenly entered her ears. Chu Luiyue's heart jumped. She almost wanted to withdraw her hand. But in the next moment, that sound quickly disappeared, as if it had never appeared. Chu Luiyue was stunned. She quietly waited for a while, and that sound indeed didn't sound again, and even the fluctuation that should have appeared didn't appear. Then, a ray of light appeared in her palm, and rushed upwards. She immediately looked up. That ray of light stopped at the last name on the honor roll of green clouds. Then, the name Tang Rui quietly disappeared. Her name replaced it. When she saw the words clearly, her hanging heart finally settled down. Because that name was Chu Yu. The thing she was most worried about didn't happen, and this made Chu Luiyue's heart calm down. She slightly raised her head, and looked at the highest point. There, it was still dark. That hidden name didn't appear. Everything looked normal. She lightly exhaled. The surrounding crowd was silent. No matter how much criticism and suspicion they had before, it all disappeared at this moment. There was nothing better to prove a person's strength than winning a competition like this, and officially entering the honor roll of green clouds. Although this matter seemed so unbelievable, but it still happened. On the Dongwang clock tower, Elder Bo Yen stroked his beard and nodded in satisfaction. This Chu Yu is indeed a promising talent. Vaguely, she had some of the vigor of that girl back then. Both of them were equally good at causing trouble, and both of them were full of spirit energy. She also had astonishing talent as a mystic cultivator and martial artist. Seems like Bo Yen, you have high hopes for this Chu Yu. A voice came from behind Elder Bo Yen. Elder Bo Yen turned around and smiled. That's right. You just came back, so you don't know much about him. This kid is very powerful. For Rong Xiu to think so highly of him, he must be quite talented. A middle-aged man walked over, looked down, and nodded. It does look good. However, Elder Meng is quite critical of him. Have you been to Pengmin Mountain? Elder Bo Yen asked in shock. Shang Yusin grinned. Do you even need to ask? If Elder Meng finds out that I'm back and didn't go over immediately, I'll be in big trouble. Elder Bo Yen nodded in agreement. That's true. However, you said that Elder Meng is dissatisfied with Chu Yu. Could it be that this kid did something out of line when he was locked up in Pengmin Mountain? Shang Yusin stretched out a finger and shook it as a meaningful smile appeared on his face. No. I just haven't seen anyone who can so easily arouse Elder Meng's emotions, and he can't forget it. That's why I'm curious. To be honest, Elder Meng isn't dissatisfied with Chu Yu, but more like, curious. Shang Yusin recalled what Elder Meng said before and touched his chin. Even I want to meet this Chu Yu personally. He glanced at Elder Bo Yen. He has only been in school for 2 months, and most of the time, he was locked up in Pengmin Mountain. Such a person hasn't appeared for several years, right? He's quite capable. Elder Bo Yen smiled. He's Wanzhang's precious disciple now, and Wanzhang loves him very much. Don't mess around. How can that be considered messing around? Many students want to get my guidance but don't have this chance. Shang Yusin didn't care. If he's outstanding enough, it won't be a problem to deal with me. Elder Bo Yen laughed out loud. Shang Yusin suddenly thought of something and asked, oh right, the divine weapon from Grey Feather's abyss has been brought back, right? Elder Bo Yan's expression became a little strange. Yes. Shang Yusin's eyes lit up. Where did you put it? I've been thinking about it for a long time, and now that I've brought it back, you have to let me study it properly. Elder Bo Yen raised his eyebrows. It's no use begging me for this. It's not with me. If it's not with you, then where is it? Shang Yusin was stunned. Such an item, logically speaking, should belong to the dean after it was brought back. But now that the dean wasn't around, Bo Yen was naturally in charge. Elder Bo Yen raised his chin at the youth below. Yes, it's with him. Shang Yusin couldn't help but laugh. Huh? What kind of joke is this? That kid, that thing recognized him as its master. Elder Bo Yen explained leisurely, and was satisfied to see the man's expression change quickly and brilliantly. Shang Yusin closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Good kid. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from LoveNet. Chapter 1233. Chu Liuyue's heart skipped a beat. That's right, at the beginning of the month, Thousand Wine Mountain must be very lively again. Let's not go. Luo Shishir frowned and looked at Chu Liyue tentatively. Chu Yu seemed to be at odds with Thousand Wine Mountain. Every time he went, he would cause a lot of trouble. What if he got into trouble again? Chu Luyue thought for a moment and said, "It's okay to go. After all, there shouldn't be anyone who would deliberately pick on me like the first time." After all, she still had Rong Xiu behind her. "Chu Yu, do you really want to go?" Luo Shishi was still a little worried. Chu Luyue nodded and smiled. "Everyone can go, why can't I?" "Don't worry, I'll be careful. And I don't want to be locked up in Pengmin Mountain again." Of course, she was talking about the recent times. After all, she had been warned when she came out a few days ago. It would be inappropriate for her to turn around and go back. It was better to wait for a while. Hearing her say this, Luo Shishi and the others were relieved. "By the way, Chu Yu, you're staying with senior brother Rong Xiu now, so we can't enter Jiuheng Mountain. We'll wait for you outside the mountain tonight, okay?" Chu Luyue nodded. "Okay." Chu Luyue returned to Jiuheng Mountain and saw Rong Xiu standing with his hands behind his back from afar. She quickly flew over and stood in front of Rong Xiu. Rong Xiu's thin lips curled up slightly. "Congratulations." Chu Luyue raised her eyebrows. "Did you do something to the Qingyun leaderboard?" "You can't say that." Rong Xiu smiled. "Although that is also your name, the power in your body now is different from back then. I just suppressed the call of that power to you. Of course, when you break through to your previous realm, the seal will naturally be lifted." Chu Luyue blinked. "My previous realm." In his impression, she had always been a rank 9 warrior and did not continue to break through. However, since he was able to get first place on both rankings, then he should be a god-level expert. However, she still didn't know what level he was at. Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly. "You will know when the time comes." At this moment, a cold and childish voice came from inside the house. "Come in and cultivate." Chu Luyue rubbed his temples. Ever since she started living at Rong Xiu's place, no one came to disturb her. Her cultivation in all aspects had become much bolder and more convenient. Dugu Mabao was even more so. Whenever he had time, he would get her to practice. "He's here." Chu Luyue responded, took a deep breath, and walked in. After this period of training, Chu Luyue's strength had actually increased a lot. At the very least, she would no longer be defeated by Dugu Mabao after taking a few steps like before. However, this bit of strength was still far from enough in Dugu Mabao's eyes. When she first met this young man, she never thought that there would be a time when she would be submissive to him. That's good," she muttered softly, and then couldn't help but say. "Junior brother Chu Yu, I was too impulsive in the past, and that's why I did so many things that you didn't like. I hope you don't mind. I promise, I won't do that again. I only hope that junior brother Chu Yu can let bygones be bygones." For a moment, Chu Luyue wanted to ask Lu Yintong if she was sick and had a fever. It was normal for her to want to let bygones be bygones. After all, Chu Luyue had his own place in the academy now. Coupled with the support of a few people behind her, she had truly become a person that wasn't to be trifled with in the academy. Everyone was more or less afraid. But Lu Yintong didn't seem to need to be so eager to please him, right? This didn't seem like something she would do. "Senior sister Lu, if you have something to say, just say it." Chu Luyue sized her up and said. Lu Yintong instantly felt as if she had been completely seen through. At this moment, she realized that Chu Yu was more intelligent and cunning than she had imagined. She clenched her fists tightly, and her nails dug into her palms. After hesitating for a while, she said, "No, nothing. I just feel that I've gone too far in the past. So, if junior brother Chu Yu needs my help in the future, just say the word." Before Chu Luyue could reply, he suddenly heard a mocking voice from the side. Junior brother Chu Yu is now protected by elder Wan Zhang and senior brother Rong Xiu. Why would he need your help? Aren't you thinking too highly of yourself? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1236. Red-tailed Red Phoenix. Chu Luyue calmly turned his head to look at Dumpling and smiled calmly. It's not strange that senior sister Jiang looks familiar. After all, senior sister Lu has one, right? Jiang Ji1 was stunned and immediately frowned. No, that's not right. She felt that this red-tailed red phoenix looked familiar, and it was definitely not just because it was a red-tailed red phoenix. She had also seen Lu Yintong's red-tailed red phoenix before. Although they were of the same race, in reality, due to the difference in bloodline power and other reasons, it looked different from the one in front of her. She could clearly tell the difference between these two divine beasts. In comparison, the one in front of her was more like the one she had fought before. At first, she didn't feel it, but now that she was standing close and looking at it carefully, the more she looked, the more she felt that it was similar. Once this thought was born, it seemed to have taken root in her mind, and she couldn't get rid of it. No, your red-tailed red phoenix is different, she said, looking at Chu Luyue with eyes full of scrutiny. Something was indeed wrong. According to Rong Xiu's personality, it was impossible for him to value someone so much for no reason, and it was even more impossible for him to let her live with him. Unless he had known this person for a long time. Moreover, their relationship was definitely not shallow. Jiang Ji1 looked at the youth in front of her carefully, trying to find even the slightest bit of hesitation and guilt on his face. However, there was none. From head to toe, the youth's expression was as usual. In the face of her interrogation, he actually laughed, with a hint of the mischievous and undisciplined aura of a youth. My contracted divine beast naturally can't be compared to those. There was a hint of pride in his laughter, full of confidence, and natural ease in his voice. It was really hard for people to doubt him when he looked like this. Senior sister Jiang, if you like it, you can take a look more. This color is very beautiful, and it's rare to see it elsewhere. Jiang Ji1 didn't believe it and stared at the red-tailed red phoenix for a while. It squatted on the young man's shoulder. It was a furry little ball, and its whole body was red. From afar, it looked like a ball of fire. It seemed to have sensed Jiang Ji1's gaze. It turned its head to look at her, then lazily buried its head in its wings. Only then did Jiang Ji1 discover that this red-tailed red phoenix seemed to be a little different from the one in her impression. The color of its feathers and eyes seemed to be denser than that one. Could it be that I was wrong? Chu Luyue patted Dumpling gently. Go. Dumpling raised her head, her eyes sparkling. She rubbed her head against Chu Luyue's face in a fawning manner, then quickly flew towards the spring. Because there were many people around, Dumpling restrained herself and only landed on a rock beside the spring. The spring water gurgled out, and her little head was almost buried in it. During this period of time, Chu Luyue would bring Dumpling over whenever she had time. Therefore, this wasn't the first time many people had seen such a scene, so it didn't attract much attention. Chu Luyue looked at Jiang Ji1, who was deep in thought. Senior Jiang, is there anything else? If not, my friends and I will be going over there. Jiang Ji1 wanted to say something but stopped. She wanted to ask her in detail, but in the end, she swallowed those words back. Xiao Xiao, let's go. With that, she turned around to leave. Liang Xiaoxiao looked surprised and hurriedly pulled her. Hey, why are you suddenly leaving? We just arrived. Jiang Ji1 frowned. I suddenly feel a little uncomfortable and want to go back and rest. Liang Xiaoxiao was even more puzzled. Uncomfortable? Wasn't she fine just now? Why did she suddenly become like this? Or was it because of what Chiyu said just now that made her unhappy? After thinking about it, Liang Xiaoxiao felt that it was because of this. Alright then, I'll go back with you. Jiang Jiwan shook her head. No need. You stay here, that's it. Don't ruin the mood because of me. Liang Xiaoxiao didn't really want to leave. After all, this was the day they could relax the most every month. If she left like this, it would be boring to go back. Then you'll be fine, right? Jiang Jiwan forced a smile. Don't worry. I can still do such a small thing. Then, she declined the request of a few young men to send her back and left alone. Liang Xiaoxiao looked at her back view and shrugged. Although she and Jiang Jiwan were best friends and had a good relationship, Jiang Jiwan still had reservations about her many times. She wasn't stupid, so how could she not see any clues? But there was no need to pursue this matter so much. People from aristocratic families like them knew what to say and what not to say. Although her talent wasn't top-notch, she still had a discerning eye. Liang Xiaoxiao quickly retracted her gaze and went to play with the others. Chu Luiyue looked at Dumpling, who wanted nothing more than to dive into the spring, and thought about staying in Thousand Wine Mountain. Dumpling only came here once every night, and after a period of time, there were obvious changes. If she could stay here for a month and completely awaken the power of her bloodline, what would it be like? After Jiang Jiwan left Thousand Wine Mountain, she quickly returned to her residence. After entering the room, she carefully closed the door and sat down at the desk. After thinking for a moment, she spread out a piece of paper and began to write a letter. After a while, a letter was written. She carefully folded the letter and stuffed it into the body of a prepared bronze bird. After injecting a stream of force, the bronze bird flapped its wings and flew outside. Under the thick night sky, the bronze bird's figure quickly disappeared. Jiang Jiwan clasped her hands in front of her and frowned. She was very suspicious of Chu Yu's identity. Also, Rong Xiu's attitude towards him was very suspicious. After thinking about it, she decided to write a letter back to the Immortal Water Mausoleum and ask her father for help to investigate. If she found anything wrong with Chu Yu, she would expose it immediately. 9 Eternal Mountain. In the silence, the void vibrated. Then, a figure appeared in front of the house. Dressed in black, he was tall and straight. It was Rong Xiu. From the looks of it, he had just returned from somewhere. He was about to walk forward when he suddenly paused and looked back. Under the dark sky, he could only see the undulating mountain range. Suddenly, a murderous intent flashed past his deep phoenix eyes. Swish! He waved his sleeve and a stream of black force flew out. Very soon, the origin power returned with a bronze bird in tow. Rong Xiu looked at the bronze bird and narrowed his eyes dangerously. Bang! There was a slight explosion. The bronze bird instantly shattered. A letter fell from it. Rong Xiu raised his hand and the letter fell into his hand. He opened it and glanced at it. With a slight movement of his fingers, the letter silently turned into powder. Then, he took out a snow-white handkerchief and wiped his hands. A cluster of golden flames burned, and the handkerchief was quickly burned to ashes. He turned around and entered the house. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1237. 10,000 Wine Mountain. Time slowly passed, and gradually, people began to leave. Luo Yanming looked at the sky and said, I have to go first too. Master just gave me a few Xian formations today and said that there will be an assessment in a few days. I have to hurry. Luo Shishir and the others expressed their understanding. Although Elder Huafeng was amiable, he was actually very strict in this aspect. In addition, there was Luo Yanlin, who had always been outstanding, so as his younger brother, Luo Yanming naturally felt even more pressure. By the way, Chu Yu, when you have time later, I want to spar with you. Luo Yanming looked at Chu Luiyue and said sincerely. Chu Luiyue raised his eyebrows in surprise. Then, he thought that Elder Huafeng must have said something to make Luo Yanming have such an idea. She smiled and nodded slightly. Okay. Actually, during this period of time, there had been all kinds of rumors about how Chu Yu passed through the Academy's barrier. But no matter which one it was basically confirmed that Chu Yu was also a Xian master. Luo Yanming had been by Elder Huafeng's side for the past few days and had indeed heard him mention this matter a lot. Although Elder Huafeng didn't elaborate, it wasn't difficult to guess that Chu Yu was extremely talented as a Xian master. This made Luo Yanming a little curious, which was why she made this invitation. Luo Yanming smiled when he saw her agree. Then it's a deal. With that, he quickly left. Shuixing couldn't help but turn around to size up Chu Luiyue and smile in surprise, to be able to make Yanming want to fight. Chu Yu, you're really amazing. Your level as a Xian master shouldn't be low, right? Chu Luiyue rubbed his chin. Not really, but thanks to my good master, it's still passable. Shuixing and Luo Shishir naturally thought that the master she was talking about was Rongxiu, so they didn't ask further. After a while, there were fewer and fewer people on the mountain. Let's go too. When Luo Shishir said this, she deliberately stared at Chu Luiyue. She didn't want what happened last time to repeat itself. There can be 1 and 2, but not 3. No one knew what kind of punishment they would receive if they did it again. Especially the one in front of him. Chu Luiyue smiled helplessly. He knew what she was worried about, so he could only raise his hands. All right. Let's leave now. Luo Shishir couldn't help but laugh. When she saw the young man's dark eyes, her heart couldn't help but tremble slightly, as if she had been hit by something. Her face heated up slightly, and she lowered her head. Chu Luiyue didn't notice her expression. He turned around and called out to a certain little thing that was already drunk and didn't know where to go. Dumpling, let's go. Dumpling shakily raised her head from the spring. Despite her reluctance, Dumpling forced herself to fly back. Chapter 1238. Of course, this alive wasn't referring to the remnant divine consciousness, but the real Shenghuan Jing. No, if it could leave the divine artifact and survive independently, then it shouldn't be called divine consciousness. That was Taizu's real soul. Chu Liuyue's question made Taizu fall silent. After a while, the great ancestor let out a long sigh. I don't know either. His voice was much lower, as if he had aged a lot in an instant. It was mixed with the loneliness and lamentation of thousands of years, as well as a trace of confusion. This was the first time Chu Luiyue heard Taizu speak to her in such a tone. He seemed to really not know. I spent thousands of years alone in the Tianling God realm. There are indeed many things that I have forgotten, including my death back then. Chu Liuyue's heart skipped a beat. In the secret history of the Tianling dynasty, it had always been recorded that Taizu had tried to break through the shackles and become a god-level powerhouse, but he failed and died. After his death, the Long Yuan sword was left in the half-divine realm that he had painstakingly condensed as a supporting divine artifact. As for the great ancestor, it was only natural that he should have vanished into thin air in that failure. Chu Luiyue had always believed in this matter because what she had heard and seen before was exactly the same. Although she had secretly wondered why Taizu's divine consciousness hadn't dissipated after the Long Yuan sword recognized its master. But at that time, she didn't think too much about it. Until now, Taizu could actually be independent of the divine artifact. Moreover, Taizu even said that he had forgotten his death back then. How could a top powerhouse forget what happened at the end of his life? There was probably something wrong with this. Chu Yu. Luo Shishi and Zhuxing walked for a while before realizing that Chu Luiyue wasn't following them. She turned around and saw that she was standing there alone, as if in a daze. Zhuxing raised his voice again. Chu Yu. What are you thinking about? We should go. Chu Luiyue finally regained his senses. He's here. As she spoke, she walked towards the two of them. What happened to you? Zhuxing looked at her strangely. Everything was fine just now. How did it become like this all of a sudden? Chu Yu, are you all right? Luo Shishi frowned worriedly. Although the expression on Chu Yu's face was still relatively calm, this kind of absent-minded appearance was extremely rare. Chu Luiyue closed his eyes and suppressed the waves in his heart. Don't worry, I'm fine. It's just that I suddenly thought of something just now and was lost in it for a moment, so I didn't follow you guys. Hey, what's the matter? Why are you so concerned about it? Zhuxing's interest was immediately piqued. He grinned and asked mysteriously. Chu Luiyue smiled. It's nothing important. It's not worth mentioning. This meant that he didn't want to reveal it. However, Zhuxing wasn't someone who wanted to get to the bottom of things. Seeing that Chu Luiyue didn't want to say more, he didn't continue asking. It's not too late to think about it when we get back. Let's hurry up and leave. If we're late, we won't be able to bear the consequences. Luo Shishi frowned slightly, but she didn't ask any more questions. The three of them continued to walk down the mountain. This time, they left in time. When they reached the bottom of the mountain and walked out of the barrier, they vaguely heard the sound of wind and thunder coming from the top of the mountain. Chu Luiyue turned around to take a look. In fact, they couldn't see anything through the barrier. However, she seemed to be able to feel the imposing Tianlei falling down one after another. It was a pity that she couldn't stay here. She retracted her gaze, said goodbye to Luo Shishi, and left on her own. When she returned to Jiuheng Mountain, it was already late at night. However, the light in Rongxiu's room was still on. Rongxiu had just walked out of his room. You're back. Chu Luiyue's heart warmed. She didn't know if it was because of Rongxiu's patience or something else. For a moment, she clearly felt a sweet and soft warmth surging from the bottom of her heart to her limbs and bones, enveloping her. She nodded. You've been waiting for me. Rongxiu's lips curled into a faint smile. Yes and no. I was looking at something quite interesting just now. Anything that caught Rongxiu's eye was definitely not an ordinary item. Chu Luiyue was a little interested. What is it? Rongxiu walked over and held her hand. Come with me. His warm and broad palm instantly wrapped around her somewhat cold hand. The familiar cold fragrance filled her body, making her feel more at ease and her whole body relaxed. She obediently followed Rongxiu into the room. After entering, Rongxiu brought her to the desk. Chu Luiyue immediately saw a book on top of it. The pages of the book were yellowed, and it seemed to be quite old. Is this the thing you're talking about? Chu Luiyue looked at Rongxiu strangely. Rongxiu raised his chin and smiled. Take a look first. Only then did Chu Luiyue pick up the book. However, when she held it in her hand, she was shocked to find that the book looked old and thin, but it was actually very heavy. If it wasn't for her physical strength, she might not have been able to pick it up. What is this? Chu Luiyue's voice came to an abrupt halt when she saw the cover. Because there was a painting on it. It was a carefully drawn picture of a sword. It was simple, grand, solemn, and dignified. The lines seemed to penetrate the back of the paper, wrapped in a great force. Just a casual glance like this almost made one unable to breathe. However, this was not the most important thing. Only the occasional rustling of the night wind through the forest could be heard, but it seemed even lonelier. Chu Luiyue sat cross-legged, holding the notebook in her hand. At this time, that frightening aura still didn't diminish at all. Chu Liuyue's gaze swept over it carefully. This was a sword. Some strange golden patterns were engraved on the scabbard, looking solemn and mysterious. The sword hilt was blue gold and carved into a dragon's head. Its eyes were deep, as if bottomless darkness. Just by looking at it like this, one would feel as if they were about to be swallowed by it. Further up was a round stem, smooth and clean, completely black, with a tassel hanging from the end. So this sword is also related to the dragon clan, Chu Luyue murmured softly. If that was the case, it was no wonder that the sword's soul of the dragon abyss sword could be successfully integrated into it. Of course, there should be Taizu's help in this to succeed in the end. She moved her mind. Flowing light flashed in front of her. In the next moment, a long sword suddenly appeared in front of her. It floated quietly in mid-air, but the surrounding space seemed to be slightly distorted by this terrifying aura. This showed how strong the power contained in it was. Chu Luyue stared at the sword in front of her. It looked exactly the same as the one drawn in the notebook. However, because that book was an item from too long ago, although it was well preserved, it was still yellowed and old. It looked as if it was covered with a layer of grayish-yellow gauze. When this sword appeared in front of her, she could clearly feel the vast aura that seemed to come from a distant time and space. Everything was so fresh. Chu Luyue flipped open the notebook. 3 vigorous and powerful words appeared on the title page. Red Cloud Sword. Chu Luyue carefully flipped through the entire book bit by bit. When she finished reading the last page, she closed it, finally closed her eyes, and let out a long breath. So, the owner of this sword, who was also its forger, was Elder Fan Bei. Back then, Elder Fan Bei obtained a precious sword embryo and made up his mind to forge a peerless sword. In order to forge this sword, he went to the Dark Feathers Abyss and spent a full 3 months there, guiding Tianlei to temper it every day before finally forging it. Unfortunately, these 3 months had exhausted all his strength and blood essence. The moment Red Cloud Sword appeared, he was already a lamp that had run out of oil. In the end, he knew that he did not have much time left, so he simply took the blood from his heart and poured it on Red Cloud Sword. With his own life as a guide, he made it reborn and crossed the threshold of a venerable artifact. In the end, the sword was forged and he died. And this Red Cloud Sword, before it could be born, fell in the Dark Feathers Abyss together with it. For thousands of years, this sword was buried deep and never saw the light of day again. Until recently, when the Dark Feathers Abyss was in chaos, the Lingxiao College elders realized that Red Cloud Sword was about to be born. In fact, many people knew that there was a divine artifact buried in the Dark Feathers Abyss. Otherwise, the Golden Wings sect and many other sects would not have sent so many people to fight for it. It was rumored that it was an Emperor divine artifact. But in fact, it was a real venerable artifact. Fortunately, this thing was snatched back by the Lingxiao College in the end, and not many people knew the true level of this divine artifact. Otherwise, it would have become a big trouble. This book was written by Elder Fan Bei when he was forging the Scarlet Heaven Sword in the past. It recorded every step of forging Red Cloud Sword, and also some of Elder Fan Bei's experience. However, because Elder Fan Bei died when this sword was just forged, he did not leave behind the incantation to use it. Thus, Chu Luyue could only research it herself from the previous records. However, this level of divine artifact was extremely intelligent. As long as she could completely master it, this would not be a problem. Chu Luyue put away the book and looked up at Red Cloud Sword in front of her. She took a deep breath and held the sword hilt. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. The longer he stayed with Chu Luyue, the stronger his aura became. When they first met, he was almost in a state where he could disappear at any time. But now, he was getting stronger. He didn't know what was going on either. However, ever since the sword's soul of the dragon abyss sword entered the scarlet heaven sword, he realized that he no longer needed to rely on it and could live freely. Chu Luiyue was more and more certain of her previous guess. This should be a part of Taizu's soul. It was just that 1,000 years had reduced his strength and destroyed his memories. That was why even he thought that he was just a remnant of his divine consciousness. Chu Luiyue thought for a moment. Suddenly, a thought flashed through her mind. If Taizu's soul was still there, then, when she refined Scarlet Heaven Sword's soul, did that mean that Taizu would have a chance to take over her body and come back to life? She took a deep breath and suppressed this thought. It would not be too late to think about everything after the refinement was completed. Girl, step back a little. Taizu stood in the air with a serious expression. Chu Luiyue took 5 steps back. Her eyes were fixed on the star stone and Scarlet Heaven sword that was placed on it. Taizu raised his hands, and the aura around him began to surge crazily. A powerful aura spread out in all directions. Soon, dark clouds gathered in the sky. The originally bright moon was covered by thick clouds, and the world became darker and darker. There were rolling mountains all around, and it was silent. Only the sound of the wind passed through the mountains, and the forest rustled. Chu Luiyue's heart seemed to be gripped by something, and her ears were filled with the sound of her heart beating violently. The wind and clouds whistled. Dark clouds surged. Finally, a bright bolt of heavenly lightning shot out from behind the accumulated layers of clouds. Then, a second one. A third one. Chu Luiyue sucked in a breath of cold air. The speed of Tianlei's appearance was far beyond her imagination. Who knew how many Tianlei's tempering would be needed to refine a venerable divine weapon's soul? Such a scene was far from what she could compare to when she forged the Cloud Sky Copper Sword. Almost at the same time, Rong Xiu, who had just laid down, suddenly opened his eyes. He lifted the blanket and jumped down from the bed. He pushed open the door and looked toward the top of the mountain. Several Tianlei were circling in the sky, swimming wildly. He narrowed his eyes, and then raised his hand. A golden stream of light flew out, transforming into countless light spots, and landed on the barrier outside Mount Zhouheng. The barrier strengthened again, and completely concealed everything that was happening inside. Chu Luiyue was completely unaware of this, because all her attention was on the Tianlei that was about to land. In a short time, dozens of silver snake-like Tianlei had gathered in the dark clouds. Most importantly, the number was still increasing. Back then, in order to forge the Dragon Abyss Sword, I triggered a total of 81 Tianlei. Now that the Scarlet Cloud Sword is a venerable divine weapon, I don't know how big of a commotion it will cause. Taizu said in a low voice as he triggered the Tianlei. Chu Luiyue's eyelids twitched violently. The Scarlet Cloud Sword was 2 grades higher than the Dragon Abyss Sword, and there was a huge gap between them. It was simply unimaginable to fill the gap between them. The black star stone reflected the numerous Tianlei in the sky, and the stars flickered. Finally, when the stars covered it, the Scarlet Cloud Sword finally rose slowly into the air. It floated quietly above the star stone, and its entire body emitted a shocking aura. It had not officially started yet, but Chu Luiyue already felt as if her heart was being heavily pressed by something, and even breathing became difficult. I wonder what kind of scene it would be when the Tianlei landed. Just as this thought flashed through her mind, she heard a loud sound coming from the sky. Boom! A thick and dazzling bolt of heavenly lightning struck down in an instant. It went straight for the Scarlet Cloud Sword. Chu Luiyue was almost blinded by the dazzling light. Following that, loud rumbling sounds rang out one after another. Boom! Boom! It was those Tianlei that struck down one after another. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. In the bright silver light that filled the sky, she almost couldn't see anything clearly. This meant that Tianlei's attack was far from over. She gritted her teeth and tried her best to circulate the origin power in her body. More and more power was poured into Scarlet Heaven's sword, and the golden runes on the scabbard became clearer. She could clearly feel that the subtle connection between her and Scarlet Heaven's sword was also constantly strengthening. As long as she persevered until the end, she would definitely succeed. However, at this moment, a sudden and strange fluctuation came from behind her. Chu Luiyue looked back, and through the flickering light, she was shocked to see Taizu kneeling on the ground as if his strength was exhausted. His body became much more illusory, as if he would be blown away by the wind at any time. His face was even paler, and his originally spirited face seemed to have aged a lot in an instant. Chu Luiyue's heart clenched. "Taizu," she shouted nervously. "How are you?" Hearing her voice, Taizu forced himself to stand up. I'm fine. It's just that there's too much Tianlei, and I've consumed too much energy." Hearing the weakness in his voice, Chu Luiyue became even more worried. Although Taizu did not have a physical body, his strength was tyrannical. This was the first time she had seen him so weak. It was really worrying. Boom! 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 Tianlei was still falling one after another. And Taizu's aura was weakening at a speed visible to the naked eye. Chu Luiyue quickly glanced at Scarlet Heaven's sword. Only 1/3 of the runes on the scabbard had lit up. This couldn't go on. Chu Luiyue thought calmly. Looking at Taizu's current state, he definitely wouldn't be able to hold on until the end. Scarlet Heaven's sword was a venerable artifact. In order to refine the sword's soul into an artifact soul, the number of Tianlei needed was astonishing. It was indeed impossible to complete it with Taizu's strength alone. Chu Luiyue didn't want to disregard Taizu's life for this. "Taizu, please stop triggering Tianlei immediately." Chu Luiyue quickly made a decision and shouted loudly. Of course, Taizu refused. No. What kind of treasure was a venerable artifact? It was a great opportunity for this girl to be lucky enough to obtain it. Many people wouldn't even be able to see it once in their lifetime, but she was so lucky to obtain it. How could he not cherish it? Even if he had to exhaust the last bit of his strength, he had to help her to the end. Then, Taizu calmed down, raised his chi, and flew up. In the gloomy sky, several more bolts of heavenly lightning appeared. The wind howled, and Taizu's figure seemed to be on the verge of collapse. Chu Luiyue watched from below, extremely nervous and distressed. She knew very well that Taizu was already close to his limit. If he didn't stop, the consequences would be unimaginable. This was not Taizu's remnant divine sense, but his true soul. If anything happened to him today, he would really be consigned to eternal damnation. Chu Luiyue's chest seemed to be burning with flames, and a trace of scarlet appeared in her eyes. "Taizu, please return." Taizu stood in midair, his body straight. He didn't look back. In the dark and dazzling world, he seemed to be alone. As time passed, Taizu's aura became weaker and weaker. Gradually, no more Tianlei appeared in the sky. Taizu's heart sank. According to his realm, even if he risked his life, he wouldn't be able to summon enough Tianlei. Boom! The last Tianlei struck. Taizu's face turned pale. He finally turned around and looked at Chu Luiyue. His expression was apologetic, and his lips trembled. It's Taizu's fault for being useless." Chu Luiyue shook her head. "You've done your best. You can't thank you enough." At this moment, only half of the patterns on Scarlet Heaven's sword lit up. Chu Luiyue closed her eyes. When he opened his eyes again, there seemed to be undercurrents and flames burning in his black jade-like eyes. She gripped Scarlet Heaven's sword tightly and immediately stood up. Most of her body had already been affected by that terrifying power, and she couldn't feel anything. At this moment, she was only relying on her last bit of willpower to hold Scarlet Heaven's sword tightly. Taizu let out a long sigh. Unfortunately, it's a waste of energy this time, Chu Luiyue said, not necessarily. Taizu was stunned. What other ways do you have? Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes and looked in a certain direction. Tianlei, there was a place that had plenty of places. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1242. Chu Luiyue looked up. Outside Zhoheng Mountain, a faint golden barrier flickered quietly in the dark night. Her heart skipped a beat, and she turned to look at a certain place at the foot of the mountain. A tall figure was flying over at a high speed. It was Rong Xiu. He was extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye, he had arrived in front of her from afar. The two of them looked at each other. Chu Luiyue said, "I'm going to Thousand Wine Mountain." Rong Xiu nodded slightly, "I'll accompany you." There was no need for any explanation. With just a look, they could understand each other's intentions and thoughts. Chu Luiyue's heart warmed, and her pale lips curled up slightly. "Aren't you going to ask me what I'm going to do?" Rong Xiu raised his eyebrows. "That's not important. As long as you want to go, I'll go with you." As he spoke, his gaze swept across the Scarlet Heaven sword in Chu Luiyue's hand. "Follow me." As soon as he finished speaking, he waved his wrist, and the barrier on the mountain top suddenly rippled. Immediately, an exit opened. His figure moved, and he took the lead to charge out. Chu Luiyue followed closely behind. After the two of them left, the barrier quickly closed up, concealing everything silently. From the outside, it was as if nothing had happened. It was late at night, and the entire academy was silent. The two of them set off from Zhoheng Mountain and went straight to Thousand Wine Mountain. Rong Xiu seemed to be very familiar with that place, and he almost didn't stop on the way. Because he was worried that the fluctuations of Scarlet Heaven's sword would attract attention, he deliberately set up a barrier around Chu Luiyue to completely conceal her aura. Just like that, the two of them successfully arrived at the foot of Thousand Wine Mountain. In the dark night, the barrier on Thousand Wine Mountain was almost invisible. From the outside, one could only see the undulating peaks and the shadows of the trees and forests. The surroundings were silent. However, Chu Luiyue's heart was beating rapidly. The Scarlet Heaven sword in her hand emitted a strange fluctuation. She lowered her head to take a look. The silver tianlei that originally covered it had almost disappeared. As for the half of the golden veins that had been lit up with much difficulty, it also showed signs of fainting. This was because the amount of tianlei he had summoned was too little, and he hadn't been able to completely refine the sword's soul into an artifact soul. That was why it was stuck in the middle, neither moving up nor down. If he couldn't make up for it in time, not only would this refinement fail, everything he had experienced before would be in vain. Therefore, he absolutely could not give up. Chu Luiyue looked up at the barrier in front of him. A vast pressure spread out from within. Chapter 1243. Shang Yusin's first reaction was to set up a barrier around himself. The terrifying power of the explosion was completely blocked outside. Even so, the tianlei was right above his head. The distance was extremely close, and it was impossible to completely avoid it. That shocking aura rushed over, causing his chest to feel stuffy, and he almost knelt on the ground. However, he still forced himself to stand and quickly looked up. At this moment, he finally saw clearly what had happened. The heavenly lightning that was supposed to descend had been completely intercepted by a sword that had appeared out of nowhere. Silver light flickered on it, and sparks flew everywhere. Bang! The sound of something exploding was heard. Shang Yusin looked down and saw that the yuan instrument that he had painstakingly forged had cracked because the tianlei's tempering had been interrupted and the change in temperature was too great. Shang Yusin raised his eyebrows and threw the item on the ground. He couldn't help but shout. Who the F***ck did this? His shout was like thunder, instantly reverberating throughout the myriad wine mountain. Chu Luyue paused and felt a little guilty. She had originally planned to bring Scarlet Heaven's sword here and wait for the tianlei in the spring to gather again before putting it in for tempering. Who knew that things would develop like this? At this moment, Shang Yusin also noticed Chu Liyue's existence and looked over with his sharp eyes. Who? Come out! As he shouted, he angrily rushed over, intending to arrest her. Seeing that the other party was rushing down, Chu Liyue knew that she couldn't hide, so she quickly stood out. Student Chu Yu greets elder. Only then did Shang Yusin see the person in front of him clearly. This was a youth who looked no more than 16 or 17 years old. His figure was thin and slender, and his face was delicate and clean. His face was a little pale, and there was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. It was obvious that he had just been through trouble. Shang Yusin shouted angrily. At this time, all students in the academy are forbidden from stepping into Myriad Wine Mountain. Don't you know? Chu Liyue thought that of course she knew, and this was not the first time she had committed a crime. She raised her eyes slightly and looked over the shoulder of the middle-aged man in front of her. In the air, Scarlet Heaven's sword was continuously swallowing the tianlei that was falling from the sky. Moreover, there were quite a few of them in tianlei, which showed that this person was not weak. She was slightly relieved and bowed to admit her mistake. Elder is right. I didn't do it on purpose. It was just a moment of desperation that I accidentally barged in. Don't tell me these useless things. When Shang Yusin thought of the incomplete divine artifact that he had destroyed, he couldn't help but feel angry. Chapter 1244. Shang Yusin thought that he was hallucinating. What did you say? He gritted his teeth and asked word by word. Every word seemed to be squeezed out from the gaps between his teeth, with a hint of gnashing teeth. Chu Liyue shrank her neck. There was nothing she could do. She had snatched his things, so she felt guilty. But there was really nothing she could do about this. Who knew that he was refining here? Besides, after she came here, she didn't do anything, and Scarlet Heaven's sword ran out on its own. It wasn't all her fault. However, she didn't dare to say such words of justification again. And it seemed that it was useless to say it. She lowered her head. This student knows her mistake. This sincere appearance of admitting her mistake made Shang Yusin unable to vent his anger. Humph. You're quite promising. Borrow tianlei. To think that you can say that. Shang Yusin flicked his sleeve and looked back at the top of the mountain. In the tianlei that was constantly hacking down, a long sword could be vaguely seen. That Scarlet Heaven sword. He narrowed his eyes and asked. Chu Liyue was a little surprised that he actually recognized the sword, but on second thought, after all, he was an elder of the academy, so it wasn't strange for him to know this. After all, this was a divine artifact refined by the academy's ancestors, and that notebook had always been kept in the academy. Yes. You got lucky, kid. Shang Yusin snorted. He had been thinking about this thing for so many years, but he never got to see it. Who would have thought that he would miss it during a short period of seclusion? The key was that Scarlet Heaven's sword had recognized a master. A venerable divine artifact recognizing a master. It wasn't that simple. He didn't know how this kid did it. Chu Liyue lowered her head even more. This student is guilty. She vaguely sensed that this elder's attitude towards Scarlet Heaven's sword seemed to be a little different from the other elders. Elder Bo Yen, and even Elder Xu Feng, who had personally gone to snatch Scarlet Heaven's sword back then, didn't seem to know so much about Scarlet Heaven's sword. Is it tempering its soul? Shang Yusin's next words surprised Chu Luiyue. But on second thought, the other party was a blacksmith in the first place, and his rank wasn't too low either. It wasn't too surprising that he would be able to see through it with a single glance. Elder's insight is truly admirable. You don't have to flatter me. To be honest, I am much more familiar with this Scarlet Heaven sword than you are. Unfortunately, he was not fated to do so. Since the venerable artifact could recognize a new owner, it meant that there was no artifact soul inside. Thinking back to what Bo Yen had told him before, he could more or less guess what was going on. Chapter 1245. At this time, the entire top of Thousand Wine Mountain was enveloped by a dazzling silver Tianlei. Amidst the rumbling of the flames, it was almost impossible to see the situation inside. One could only vaguely see Shang Yusin floating in the air. As for the place where the heavenly lightning gathered, only a slender figure could be vaguely seen. Seeing this scene, Rongxiu stopped not far away. He had originally planned to help, but since someone had made a move first, he would just wait and see. It seemed that everything was going smoothly, however, this harmonious scene was quickly broken. Because someone else had come. Elder Ouyang had heard that Shang Yusin had come out of seclusion and was planning to refine weapons at Thousand Wine Mountain at night, so he wanted to come and take a look. However, as soon as he stepped into the barrier, he realized that something was wrong. This fluctuation was too shocking. He looked up almost immediately and was stunned by the scene in front of him. Tianlei kept striking down, but it was not aimed at Shang Yusin. However, Shang Yusin, who was standing in the air, was indeed triggering Tianlei. What's going on? Elder Ouyang wanted to go forward without saying anything. Suddenly, a figure appeared from the side and blocked his path. Elder Ouyang, please wait. The deep and familiar voice stunned Elder Ouyang. When he saw the person in front of him clearly, his eyes widened in shock. Rongxiu. Why are you here? Rongxiu smiled. I just arrived too. I'm waiting for someone. Elder Ouyang looked at the top of the mountain suspiciously. Who are you waiting for? There was no point in lying at this time. Anyway, he would find out in the end, so Rongxiu was very honest. Chu Yu. Chu Yu. Elder Ouyang's eyelids twitched. He was very familiar with this name. Wasn't this the kid who had just caused a ruckus here a while ago? He reacted for a moment, and his expression became extremely interesting. He pointed at the blurry figure on the top of the mountain in disbelief. You mean, that's Chu Yu? Rongxiu nodded and explained in a gentle voice, she's busy right now and shouldn't be distracted. Elder Ouyang, please be considerate and go there later. Elder Ouyang, do you have something to do? On this Thousand Wine Mountain, there was so much Tianlei. Wasn't it obvious what that kid was busy with? What is he doing now? Elder Ouyang was so agitated that he started to stutter. Oh, right. And that guy Shang Yusin. What is he doing now? Chu Yu's absurdity was one thing, but why did Shang Yusin seem to be helping? Elder Ouyang was confused. He was in a bad mood. You can ask them when they come down, said Rongxiu with a smile. Elder Ouyang was also a weapon refiner, so he naturally understood that outsiders should not disturb them at this time. Otherwise, if something really happened, it would be hard to salvage the situation. Even if he thought with his toes, he knew that Shang Yusin was definitely going for that divine weapon. Boom! 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 Another earth-shattering sound. The entire Thousand Wine Mountain was as bright as day. As those Tianlei continued to fall, the golden patterns on Scarlet Heaven's sword gradually appeared after being refined over and over again. Chu Liyue held the sword hilt tightly with both hands, held his breath, and stared at the scabbard. Finally, the last pattern lit up. Swoosh! The eyes of the dragon head on the sword hilt suddenly burned with flames. One gold, one blue. It was like a dragon that had been sleeping for a long time had finally woken up. Roar! The dragon's roar roared. It resounded throughout the world. Chu Liyue gritted his teeth and pulled the sword hilt with all his might. Clang! The sword body finally separated from the scabbard. At this moment, all the Tianlei in the sky suddenly fell together. Shang Yusin's heart skipped a beat. There was not enough Tianlei. He immediately turned around and shouted at Elder Ouyang, "Ouyang! Don't waste your breath. Come up and help." Elder Ouyang was stunned for a moment. "Is he calling me?" Shang Yusin raised his voice, "Hurry up. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network." Chapter 1247. The moment the long sword was unsheathed, there seemed to be a layer of invisible barriers shattering. An aura that seemed to come from a distant time and space instantly rushed out of the Scarlet Heaven sword and entered Chu Liyue's body. It was as if there was a thread connecting her to the Scarlet Heaven sword. The Scarlet Heaven sword, which was originally extremely heavy, suddenly became as light as a feather at this moment. Chu Liyue's previous internal injuries also began to rapidly recover under the nourishment of this vast and gentle power. That aura was familiar, but also unfamiliar. It was familiar because it was mixed with the power of the sword's soul of the Dragon Abyss sword. Vaguely, it also seemed to have the aura of Taizu. As for the unfamiliar, that was the original power of the Scarlet Heaven sword. She looked at the Scarlet Heaven sword in her hand, and something seemed to surge in her heart. In the next moment, she swung her sword, a terrifying sword chi swept forward. After a short silence, a large number of trees in front of her were cut in half. When those trees fell together, Chu Liyue realized what had happened and couldn't help but widen her eyes slightly. She just wanted to give it a try subconsciously. It was just a light wave, but how could it produce such a terrifying power? At a glance, all the trees that could be seen had been silently cut down. But this was not the end. Because these trees were unable to block this sword chi. Therefore, after it swept through the lush forest, its speed did not decrease at all and it headed straight for the barrier of the Thousand Wine Mountain. "Stop it!" Elder Ouyang was shocked and hurriedly shouted. Shang Yusin was about to move when he saw a figure flash past his eyes. It was Rongxiu. He raised his wrist and a golden stream of light flew out quickly. Boom! The speed of this force was extremely fast. It caught up from behind and finally managed to stop the sword chi before it could hit the barrier. The two forces collided fiercely and produced an explosive sound. The barrier was impacted by the aftershock and shook violently. Elder Ouyang trembled with fear when he saw this. He hurriedly rushed over. He often came to the Thousand Wine Mountain, so he was very familiar with this and quickly strengthened the barrier. After confirming that the barrier was no longer in danger of being damaged, he let out a long sigh of relief. If the barrier was broken, everyone would know what had happened on Thousand Wine Mountain. It wouldn't be good if things got out of hand. Thinking of this, he became angry again. He raised his eyebrows and glared at Chu Liyue, grinding his teeth. "Chu Yu. You better give me an explanation." Chu Liyue touched his nose and carefully put away the Scarlet Heaven sword. With a thought, Scarlet Heaven sword directly went to her dantian. In this way, she could still clearly sense all the movements on Scarlet Heaven sword. This made her believe that Scarlet Heaven sword's soul had been completely tempered, and it had indeed completely recognized her as its master. Her heart, which had been hanging in the air, was finally at ease. The most important matter had been resolved. Next, it was time to deal with the subsequent troubles. She looked at Elder Ouyang with a helpless expression, but her eyes were clear. Elder Ouyang, I know I was wrong. No matter what, it was always good to admit his mistake first. However, Elder Ouyang already had experience, so he did not fall for her trick at all. With one hand behind his back, he snorted coldly. You know you were wrong. This old man didn't see it at all. Chu Yu, this is not the first time you broke the rules and barged into Thousand Wine Mountain, right? This old man remembers that it has only been a month since you were locked up in Pengmin Mountain for 10 days. Not to mention that you were also locked up in the middle of the month because of other mistakes. What, are you uncomfortable if you don't cause trouble for a day? Elder Ouyang said angrily. You really don't learn from your mistakes. Chu Luyue waited for him to scold her before explaining herself in a low voice. Elder Ouyang, this student really didn't mean it. You also saw the situation just now. That divine weapon needs to be tempered, so this student can only come here. And after coming here, it directly went out of control, which led to the following things. Don't give me that. Elder Ouyang irritably interrupted Chu Luyue's words and only felt a headache. Don't you know what level of strength you have now? You actually want to use your own strength to temper the soul of this divine weapon now. Do you think that you have been living too well during this period of time, or are you really not afraid of death? If something really happened, no one would be able to help her. Chu Luyue heaved a sigh of relief in her heart. Although Elder Ouyang's words were harsh, he still considered her in his heart. Moreover, if he really didn't like her, he wouldn't have helped her without reservation just now. In the end, he still had a sharp tongue but a soft heart. Chu Luyue smiled at Elder Ouyang. Isn't this student fine? Elder, although this student is young and inexperienced, I also know that life is precious and I don't dare to joke about this kind of thing. If he really didn't have the slightest confidence and urged her to come, she wouldn't have agreed. Elder Ouyang choked. What she said was not without reason. After all, whoever obtained such a treasure would not think too much about it. But it was still too dangerous. What, do you think that with Rongxiu around, you will be safe? Chu Luyue was silent for a moment and nodded seriously. Yes. You, Elder Ouyang felt even more choked. Rongxiu's lips slightly curved into a perfect arc, and he chuckled. Elder Ouyang, since I brought her here, I will naturally bring her back in one piece. You. Elder Ouyang flicked his sleeve. This interrogation couldn't continue. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 1248. Elder Ouyang couldn't ask the two of them anymore, so he simply changed his target. Shang Yusin. What's wrong with you? Rongxiu was fooling around with Chu Yu. Who was he? How could he help the tyrant? But Shang Yusin was really not afraid of Elder Ouyang. Hearing this, he crossed his arms and said lazily, Didn't you see it just now? Help him. Didn't you see what he's holding in his hand? He had been thinking about Scarlet Heaven's sword for many years, but he couldn't see it. Now that he finally had the chance, it had already recognized Chu Yu as its master. Of course, he was unwilling, But what could he do? A divine weapon of this level would not easily recognize a master. Even if he had been thinking about it for many years, he didn't dare to have such extravagant hopes. From the beginning to the end, he was just thinking about waiting for Scarlet Heaven's sword to be born. After it was brought back to the academy, he could seize the opportunity to observe and study it closely. Now, it had become Chu Yu's divine weapon. Other than the word opportunity, there was no other way to describe it. Chu Yu wanted to refine the weapon's soul for it. How could he just watch and ignore it? After all, he had been thinking about it for many years, so he still had some thoughts in his heart. Even if it wasn't for Chu Yu, he had to do it for Scarlet Heaven Sword. Elder Ouyang felt uncomfortable all over. He closed his eyes and held his forehead with a headache. None of them were easy to deal with. However, it just so happened that these people were all eloquent, making it extremely difficult for him to even refute. Ouyang, there's no point in asking this now. Shang Yusin touched his chin. Didn't you participate just now? Elder Ouyang, if it wasn't for Shang Yusin urging him, would he have done this? It was his fault for being muddle-headed at that time. He actually helped. What you mean is that we're all in the same boat now. Shang Yusin looked at him strangely with an expression that said, "Aren't you talking nonsense?" Elder Ouyang's eyebrows twitched violently. He felt that it was wrong for him to even think about communicating with them. Shang Yusin, he was not in the academy all year round. Whenever he came back, he would go into seclusion to cultivate. He had always been carefree and did things according to his mood. Rong Xiao, one of the most outstanding geniuses in the academy. His position in the academy was extremely high, and he had even more privileges than some of the elders. Chu Yu, there was nothing much to say about this. He was just an audacious brat. You've even taught me and made mistakes again. Elder Ouyang took a deep breath and tried to calm himself down. Shang Yusin, Bo Yan will know about what happened tonight sooner or later. Shang Yusin nodded. Of course he would know. The profound formation at the foot of the Thousand Wine Mountain and the surrounding barrier still had a portion of his power. However, this is nothing. He already knew that Scarlet Heaven Sword was in Chu Yu's hands. Refining the artifact soul. Could it still be considered a mistake? If it was in my hands, I would have done the same. Shang Yusin said indifferently with a regretful expression. Unfortunately, I'm not that lucky. As he spoke, he looked at Chu Luyue. I've helped you today. How about lending this Scarlet Heaven Sword to me for a day? Chu Luyue already knew that he had been concerned about Scarlet Heaven Sword for many years, so she nodded very straightforwardly. Chu will naturally repay Elder's kindness with gusto. Whenever you want it, just tell me. In any case, Scarlet Heaven Sword had already completely become hers. No one else could forcefully take it away from her, so there was nothing to worry about. Seeing that she was so straightforward, Shang Yusin instantly appreciated her a little more. Ha ha ha. Good. Just based on your words, I didn't help you for nothing today. As he spoke, he was so excited that he even reached out his hand, wanting to pat Chu Luyue's shoulder. Rong Xiao silently took a step forward and stood between the two of them, preventing Shang Yusin's fan-like palm from landing on him. Elder Ouyang, I actually brought junior brother Chu Yu here today. Everything happened because of me. I am willing to take all responsibility for this matter. Rong Xiao, Elder Ouyang had long expected that Rong Xiao would stand up for him, but when he really heard him say so, he couldn't help but be surprised. He really didn't understand why Rong Xiao was so protective of Chu Yu. But it had to be said that with Rong Xiao's appearance, this matter wouldn't be too serious. He took a deep look at Rong Xiao, shook his head, and sighed. You haven't set foot here for a few years. I never expected that this time, you actually. Halfway through his words, he stopped, as if he wanted to say something but hesitated. Rong Xiao's expression was the same as usual, and he smiled faintly. I haven't had time to thank you for today's matter. Elder Ouyang completely lost his temper. He looked around and furrowed his brows. On the top of the mountain, it was a mess. Countless mountains and forests had collapsed. Because of the bombardment of countless Tianlei, large patches of black appeared on the mountain rocks, and some even had deep cracks. It wasn't difficult for anyone to guess what had happened here. It seems that Wine Mountain has to be closed for a while. It would take a lot of effort to repair it. In the sky, the dark clouds gradually dissipated. It was already early in the morning, and a ray of white appeared on the horizon. It seemed that it would be daybreak soon. Let's go. Let's go see Bo Yen together. Elder Ouyang let out a long breath and took the lead to leave. Chapter 1249. Donghuang Clock Tower. In the solemn hall, the air seemed to have frozen. Elder Bo Yen sat at the top without any expression on his face. Only his slightly clenched fists showed that he was not as calm as he appeared to be. In front of him stood the 4 people who just came out of Thousand Wine Mountain. That's the gist of it. Elder Ouyang explained the cause and effect of the incident, and his mouth was almost dry from all the talking. After that, the hall fell into dead silence again. After a while, Elder Bo Yen spoke slowly. So, you rushed here early in the morning because you guys destroyed half of Thousand Wine Mountain. Shang Yusin could not help but remind him. Mainly to help Chuyu refine Scarlet Cloud Sword's soul, the soul. Cough, it's just that some trees and rocks were destroyed, then. The spring is still fine. He did not say the last sentence, and even the words he said before became much softer under Elder Bo Yan's gaze. Those who knew Elder Bo Yan knew that he was rarely angry. But once he was angry, it was extremely difficult to deal with. Even Shang Yusin and Elder Ouyang, who had worked with him for many years, felt a chill. Chuyu, in that case, this matter was still caused by you. Chu Liuyua's shoulders drooped, and he lowered his head slightly. This student was rash and made a big mistake. Elder Bo Yen, please punish me. Of course you should be punished. Elder Bo Yen really did not know what to say. This Chuyu, just when I thought he would be obedient and stop, he kept causing new problems. And each time, it was more serious than the last. This time, he even implicated Shang Yusin and Ouyang. Right, there was also Rong Xiao. Elder Bo Yen, if I did not take the initiative today, junior brother Chuyu would definitely not go to Thousand Wine Mountain. Rong Xiao's tone was calm, but also very sincere. I promised you before that I would teach junior brother Chuyu well. So now, the person who should be punished is me. Elder Bo Yen was so angry that he laughed. You think I won't punish you? You can't get away with this matter. Rong Xiao, if you want to take on everything, you have to see if it's feasible, and if you can take on the responsibility. His gaze swept across the few of them. None of you can escape. What kind of place was the Thousand Wine Mountain? It's fine if Chuyu doesn't know, but the remaining 3 are very clear. Under such circumstances, they actually dared to do such a thing. They were simply trying to overturn the heavens. The 4 of them quieted down. Even Shang Yusin had lost his temper and stood there obediently. Elder Bo Yen closed his eyes. Who else knows about this? Elder Ouyang said, apart from the people in the hall, no one else knows. In other words, only Elder Bo Yen had received the news. This made Elder Bo Yen relax a little. If things got out of hand, it wouldn't be easy to clean up the mess. He fell into deep thought and began to consider how to punish these people. Time seemed to pass extremely slowly. Since Elder Bo Yen did not speak, the remaining 4 also remained silent. Finally, after a long while, Elder Bo Yen raised his head and looked at Chu Liyue. Chuyu. Student is here. That artifact spirit has been refined successfully. Elder, it's done. Elder Bo Yen nodded. Although this matter was ridiculous, it wasn't completely fruitless. That divine artifact had already become Chuyu's, and no one could snatch it away. Now that he was able to refine the artifact spirit and merge with it, it could be considered a fortunate thing. Although no one said anything about the divine artifact recognizing Chuyu as its master, but in reality, there were quite a number of elders who were in the know who were extremely unhappy. In order to take back this artifact, the academy had prepared for a long time and put in a lot of effort. But in the end, it was taken by a new student who had just entered the academy for 2 months. Of course, they wouldn't be happy about it. But because this matter had already happened and couldn't be changed, they could only accept it. Only when Chuyu took out his strength to prove himself, would he be able to convince those people. Elder Bo Yen actually thought highly of Chuyu, and because of this, he gave him chances time and time again. Even if Chuyu had violated the rules a few times, he still stood on Chuyu's side. This time, Chuyu had gone overboard, but he couldn't really do anything to him. After thinking about it for a long time, the only good news was that he had managed to refine a weapon soul. Elder Bo Yen comforted himself as he waved at Chu Luiyue. "Alright, you can go back first. Later, I will discuss with your master and see what kind of punishment we should give you." Chu Luiyue's thoughts moved slightly, and she instantly guessed that Elder Bo Yen had something to say to the other 3, so she tactfully took her leave. "Yes." She bowed, then quickly turned and left the hall. Her actions were clean and tidy, without the slightest bit of sloppiness. Until her figure completely disappeared outside the door, Elder Bo Yen then looked at the remaining 3 people in front of him. His brows slowly creased, and his voice became more serious. This time, did it involve the spring eye? No. Elder Ouyang immediately said. At that time, all of us were above the mountain peak, and there was still some distance from the spring eye. In fact, the Tianlei had been swallowed by the Scarlet Heaven Sword, and other than some remnant energy waves that caused some damage to the surroundings, everything else was fine. Of course, this was ignoring Chu Yu's last unconscious strike. That's good. However, I will still personally check it later. Elder Bo Yen said. Regarding this, the 3 of them had no objections. The spring eye was of great importance, and it was normal for Elder Bo Yen to be so cautious. This matter must be kept a secret, and no one else can know about it. If one more person knew, it would be more troublesome. Although your actions today were pardonable. However, this punishment cannot be avoided. Elder Bo Yen looked at the 3 of them. Think about it yourselves, what should we do about this? The sky gradually brightened. When Chu Luiyue walked out of the Donghuang Bell Tower, it was already morning. However, there were not many people in the Qingming Square at this time, so no one saw her walk out. Chu Luiyue looked back at the closed door, pursed her lips, and then turned to leave, heading straight for Jiuheng Mountain. When Chu Luiyue returned to Jiuheng Mountain, she felt that something was wrong the moment she landed. She paused for a moment, but still walked forward. When she opened the door, she saw a familiar face. Dugu Mabao was sitting upright, and when he heard the sound, he looked up. Debao Chu Luiyue called out to him, but when she met that pair of demonic purple eyes, she inexplicably felt a little guilty. Dugu Mabao just looked at her quietly. You went to Thousand Wine Mountain during the ban again. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from LoveNet. Chapter 1250. Chu Luiyue sighed in her heart. She knew that nothing could be hidden from him. Dugu Mabao seemed to have countless pairs of eyes in the academy. No matter what happened, he could always quickly and clearly understand it. Chu Luiyue had long felt that this matter was too strange, but she had never been able to get an answer. Just like now. Last night on Thousand Wine Mountain, there were indeed only the 4 of them. With the protection and concealment of the barrier outside the mountain, no one outside knew about it. Logically speaking, other than the 4 of them, Elder Bo Yen should be the only one who knew about this. And they were the ones who took the initiative to confess to Elder Bo Yen. Dugu Mabao's guess was so accurate. It really didn't make sense. Yes. Chu Luiyue chose to tell the truth. She didn't think that she had the ability to deceive Dugu Maobao. Dugu Maobao frowned slightly, and the look in his eyes became dangerous. Have you forgotten what I told you before? Of course, Chu Luiyue didn't forget. At that time, it was because Dugu Maobao made it clear that she was not allowed to enter Thousand Wine Mountain at that time that she obediently obeyed until now. Even if Dumpling stared at the spring and refused to leave every time, she never stayed there for too long. The situation today is indeed a little special, Chu Luiyue explained helplessly. I went to refine my weapon soul. Dugu Maobao snorted and turned his head away. Even if you don't go to Thousand Wine Mountain, there are other ways. There are many mountains where the weapon refiners are, and there are a few of them overseeing it. It's the same if you go to them. Why do you have to do this? Chu Luiyue's eyelids twitched. Debao. Do you think that I can take this path? Since the first day she entered the academy, she had already heard many rumors about the weapon refiners. They were arrogant, unsociable, cold, and rarely came out even once in a year. She didn't even have enough time to admire them. How could they think of such a solution? Although she was bold and occasionally acted presumptuously, it didn't mean that she didn't know her limits. Dugu Maobao choked. Of course you. His voice stopped abruptly, and a complicated emotion flashed through his eyes. Chu Luiyue did not see the change in his expression clearly, but she could tell that something was amiss with his tone. She could not help but ask curiously, of course, what's wrong with me? Dugu Maobao closed his eyes. When he opened them again, his eyes had regained their clarity. It's nothing. I was careless. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. She still felt that Dugu Maobao's answer was a little strange, but she couldn't put her finger on it. Even if you can't do it, Rongxiu can. However, he brought you directly to Thousand Wine Mountain. Humph. Dugu Maobao sneered. Rongxiu thought that the situation was not chaotic enough. Chu Luiyue lowered her eyes slightly and didn't reply. She hadn't thought of this before, but Rongxiu was the number 1 on the Green Cloud ranking. How could she have forgotten about this? Judging from the polite attitude of the elders in the academy towards Rongxiu, if he personally came forward, it might not be impossible to invite him. However, just as Dugu Maobao said, he didn't do so. However, this was understandable. After all, it was best not to owe favors. Relatively speaking, it was much more troublesome to ask those senior refiners for help than to go to Thousand Wine Mountain directly. Even though Rongxiu might face quite a bit of punishment if he chose the latter, Rongxiu definitely had his own considerations before he made this choice. Chu Luiyue thought for a moment, then walked over with an earnest smile. Debao, don't be angry. This matter is already in the past, isn't it? Not only did I come back safely, but I also successfully tempered the weapon's soul. Even if I receive a little punishment, the benefits definitely outweigh the disadvantages. Dugu Maobao didn't say anything. How was he going to explain to her that he wasn't just worried about this? After pausing for a moment, Dugu Maobao finally shook his head. If there's a next time, I won't let you off. Chu Luiyue smiled, her eyes curved. All right. Dugu Maobao's gaze swept across her face, opened his mouth, and finally said, since the weapon's soul has been tempered, you should study and cultivate more. There are very few venerable artifacts in the world. It's a great honor for you to be able to obtain one. You must cultivate well. Chu Luiyue nodded vigorously. Definitely. After spending so much effort, if she couldn't make the best use of it, wouldn't it be a huge loss? Dugu Maobao nodded and immediately stood up to leave. Chu Luiyue couldn't help but say, Debao, are you leaving now? Aren't you going to stay a little longer? Dugu Maobao stopped in his tracks. I'll be back in the evening. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. Ever since they came to Lingxiao College, she almost never spent too much time with Dugu Maobao during the day. His daily training was also held between evening and night. It was as if he had other important things to do at other times. But in the Ling Shao Academy, what kind of things did he need to do every day? Debao, when you're not with me, where are you? Chu Luiyue finally couldn't help but ask. If I want to look for you, I don't even know where to go. Dugu Mabao turned around and glanced at her, his face expressionless. He said calmly, you don't have to look for me. If you're in trouble in the college, I'll rush over. After saying that, he directly lifted his feet and left. Chu Luiyue's frown deepened. Debao. What secret was he hiding? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1251. Chu Luiyue stayed anxiously in her residence for a while. In the afternoon, news came from the academy. Thousand Wine Mountain would be closed for maintenance for a month. The students were very surprised. After all, although Thousand Wine Mountain had a ban every day, it had never been closed for a month. Everyone was discussing this and coming up with all sorts of guesses. But in reality, even many elders were confused about this. It was still fine yesterday, but today, it was inexplicably going into seclusion for quite some time. It was really strange. But many elders knew that Thousand Wine Mountain was not an ordinary place, so they did not ask much. Although the students regretted that they lost a place to relax, it was only for a month, so they accepted it naturally. Of course, it was meaningless if they did not accept it. Chu Luiyue wanted to go out for a walk and then go to Thousand Wine Mountain to see Dumpling, but after thinking about it, she gave up. Now, she could only hope that Dumpling could safely pass the month in Thousand Wine Mountain. After temporarily putting this matter aside, Chu Luiyue began to wait for Rong Xiu to return. At the same time, she was waiting for the punishment she was about to face. She was not naive enough to think that she could escape. From Elder Bo Yan's reaction, this was the angriest he had ever been, and he would not let it go so easily. One must know that the last time he knew that she had taken the Scarlet Heaven sword for herself, he did not show such an expression. This showed how important Thousand Wine Mountain was. This also made Chu Luiyue even more certain that there was a huge secret related to the academy hidden in the spring at the top of Thousand Wine Mountain. Chu Luiyue could not think of what the academy would do to her. Although Elder Wanzheng and Rong Xiu were helping her, she instinctively felt that her fate would not be good. They waited all the way until nightfall. But the one who returned was not Rong Xiu, but Elder Wensi. Chu Yu. Elder Wensi stood outside the barrier and placed his green jade token on it. At the same time, he called out Chu Luiyue's name. Chu Luiyue, who had been waiting quietly in the room, immediately got up and walked out when he heard the noise. She saw Elder Wensi outside the barrier at a glance. At this moment, he was looking at her with a complicated gaze with one hand behind his back. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat, and he unconsciously slowed down his steps. Elder Wensi, why are you here? Elder Wensi didn't say anything. He just looked at her like that, as if he was probing, puzzled, and conflicted. After a long while, he said, "Come out first." "Oh." Chu Luiyue said, then walked out of the barrier, and then stood in front of Elder Wensi. "Did you get into trouble again?" Elder Wensi tried to make his voice sound calm, but in fact, everyone could hear the suppressed emotions in it. Chu Luiyue hesitated for a moment before nodding. Elder Wensi held his forehead, not knowing what to say. "Didn't you just come out from Pengmin Mountain?" "Ah. Why is he causing trouble again?" It had been a long time since he saw Bo Yan's expression. What was even more shocking was that this time, it seemed to have implicated Rong Xiu, as well as Shang Yusin and Ouyang, those two old fellows. "You're really getting more and more capable. Tell me, what did you do to make Bo Yan so angry?" Chu Luiyue immediately understood. It seemed that Elder Wensi didn't know about this matter. Although Elder Bo Yen was angry, he still chose to suppress this matter. On one hand, it might be because this matter involved a lot of people, and on the other hand, it might be to protect the secret of Thousand Wine Mountain. But Chu Luiyue had no way of knowing about this. She pursed her lips and asked carefully, Elder Wensi, Rong Xiao, and the others. How are they? You still have the mood to ask them. You can't even protect yourself now. Elder Wensi finally couldn't help but pat the back of Chu Luiyue's head. But considering that the child was still young and looked pitiful, he couldn't bear to hit her too hard. Chu Luiyue hissed, holding her head and looking at him pitifully. Elder Wensi's heart softened at first, then he shuddered. Pooey. What pitiful. This kid knew that he was amenable to coaxing but not coercion, so he deliberately looked at him like that. It must be. If he really didn't do anything, why would Bo Yen have such a reaction? Unfortunately, Bo Yen seemed to have made up his mind to block the news, and only told him to bring Chu Yu over, but didn't mention the reason. He could only speculate in his heart. But no matter how he thought about it, he couldn't figure out what this kid did to involve so many powerful people. Elder Wensi felt a chill run down his spine, and looked at Chu Luiyue warily. This kid, could it be that one day in the future, he would sell him out as well? They will deal with it themselves, you don't have to worry about it. Right now, Wanzheng is discussing with Bo Yen how to deal with you in the Donghuang Bell Tower. Wanzheng wants you to be there no matter what, so he asked me to bring you over first. Chu Luiyue's heart warmed slightly. Elder Wanzheng should have known about this by now, but he insisted on this request because he was concerned about her. She nodded. Thank you, Elder Wensi. Elder Wensi snorted. Let's go. As the elder who recruited Chu Yu, although he wasn't his master, he still had some responsibility. At first, he only felt happy and excited that he had recruited such a rare genius. But now, why did he feel like he had been cheated? And the longer Chu Yu stayed in the academy, the more obvious this feeling became. Elder Wensi couldn't help but sigh when he thought of this. Why did he have to deal with all these troublesome people? Arriving at the Donghuang Bell Tower again and entering the hall, Chu Luiyue clearly felt that the atmosphere was different from before. I've brought him. Elder Wensi said. Chu Luiyue quickly looked up to take a look. In the huge hall, Elder Bo Yen and Elder Wanzheng were sitting there. Other than them, Rong Xiao and the other two were no longer there. She retracted her gaze and bowed respectfully. Student Chu Yu greets Elder Bo Yen and Master. Elder Bo Yen gave Elder Wensi a look. Elder Wensi understood tacitly. Then you guys go ahead, I still have something to do, so I'll leave first. With that, he turned and left. When his figure completely disappeared outside the door, Chu Luiyue immediately felt that the atmosphere in the room had become tense. Even the air seemed to have started to condense. Two pairs of eyes that seemed to have materialized landed on her body. It was as if a sharp knife had scraped past her. Chu Yu, Bo Yen said that you caused trouble in Thousand Wine Mountain again, is that true? Elder Wanzheng asked in a low voice. Chu Luiyue nodded honestly. Student is at fault. Elder Wanzheng took a deep breath. Elder Bo Yen snorted. Wanzheng, he admitted it himself, what else do you want to explain for him? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. For Chu Yu to have this kind of attitude, it wasn't like he was a rotten wood that couldn't be carved. However, after the previous 2 times, he no longer dared to completely believe that Chu Yu would change his ways. Originally, I discussed with your master to lock you up in Pingmin Mountain for a period of time. Chu Luiyue's eyes flickered. However, I did the same thing the previous 2 times, but it didn't seem to have any warning effect on you. Elder Bo Yen could tell that Chu Yu didn't seem to be afraid of this matter at all. If it was someone else, they would have become obedient after going there once. However, Chu wasn't like that at all. Therefore, he felt that this method was useless against Chu. Therefore, this time, I will change to another punishment. Chu Liuyue's heart suddenly felt empty. I thought I could go there again. What a pity, she paused and couldn't help but say. Elder Bo Yen, student has made a serious mistake this time and is willing to accept any punishment. You can lock me up in Pengmin Mountain again. Elder Bo Yen looked at her with a strange expression. Why? Do you really want to go there again? Chu Luyue tactfully stopped this topic. You misunderstood. Student means that student will be willing to accept any punishment you give. Only then did Elder Bo Yen nod in satisfaction. It's good that you have this awareness. As for your punishment, from today onwards, you will be responsible for guarding the Beast Park for a month. Beast Park. A month. Chu Luyue and Elder Wanjing spoke in unison. The difference was that Chu Luyue didn't know what the Beast Park was, but Elder Wanjing was shocked that Elder Bo Yen would punish him for a month. Bo Yen. I don't agree. Elder Wanjing swallowed the vulgarities that were about to come out of his mouth and slammed the table angrily. What kind of place is the Beast Park? You want him to go there for a month? Aren't you sending him to his death? No. This time must be reduced. Elder Bo Yan's expression was calm as he said leisurely, if it was someone else, it would naturally be dangerous. However, don't forget that Chu has a contract with a divine beast. Since he has the ability to contract with a red-tailed phoenix, wouldn't he have the ability to guard the Beast Park for a month? Elder Wanjing choked. That's different. Those beasts in the Beast Park have always been free-range. They are untamed and violent. Even if some elders went there, they would occasionally get injured, let alone Chu. You have too many concerns. Elder Bo Yen shook his head firmly. Chu has caused trouble time and time again, but he is very lucky. Last time, under the siege of so many god-level experts, he managed to escape unscathed. This time, when he was refining his weapon spirit, countless Tianlei struck him, but he came out unscathed. I don't think it's enough to say that he is lucky. Chapter 1253. Chu Liuyue's brows twitched slightly. She had been imprisoned at Pengmin Mountain twice. The first time, it was Elder Wenxi who sent her there. The second time, it was Rongxiu. However, this time, Elder Bo Yen actually planned to send her there personally. What exactly was the place that made him so cautious? Of course, this did not exclude the possibility that Elder Bo Yen could not assign anyone to send her there in order to prevent the news from spreading. However, judging from Elder Wanjing's vehement objection, that Beast Park should not be a good place to stay. At the very least, when she was imprisoned at Pengmin Mountain, Elder Wanjing was never worried about her safety. But this time, Chu Luyue collected her thoughts and followed closely behind the two of them. The three of them came out of the Donghuang Bell Tower and went straight to the Beast Park. After walking for a while, Chu Luyue realized that they were heading towards the Xian Master's area. Elder Wanjing seemed to have seen through her doubts and moved closer to her to explain. Elder Wanjing said, the Beast Park is indeed within the Xian Master's area, but it does not belong to them alone. The martial artists and Xian Master's elders will take turns to patrol here. Chu Luyue nodded. Elder Wanjing saw that her expression was normal and thought to himself that this brat still did not know what she was going to face later. He could not help but sigh in his heart. Chu Luyue saw his worry and thought for a while before asking, Master, is the Beast Park very dangerous? Elder Wanjing paused. Forget it. You will know when we get there. Chu Luyue could only suppress her curiosity. After going around the rugged mountains, Chu Luiyue even saw a few high-level xian formations in the middle. After about an hour, Elder Bo Yen finally stopped. "We're here. The beast park is below us." Chu Luiyue took a few steps forward and followed Elder Bo Yan's line of sight. Dozens of mountains stretched endlessly. The trees were lush and white mist drifted in the middle of the mountains. At first glance, it looked like a quiet mountain forest. It was no different from the other places in the academy. However, Chu Luiyue knew that things were not that simple. Because in the sky above this mountain region, there was actually a huge silver profound formation. It floated quietly in the air, covering the entire forest in a translucent state. Through the gaps between the streams of light, one could clearly see the scenery below. However, everyone who stood here could feel the astonishing pressure coming from the profound formation. He would never dare to be impudent. Chu Luiyue held his breath. This xian formation was definitely one of the best xian formations she had ever seen in her life. Compared to the academy's barrier, it was not inferior at all. One had to know that constructing such a xian formation required the joint efforts of many experts. The amount of manpower and resources consumed was incalculable. To be able to construct such a xian formation within the academy without caring about the cost, it was enough to prove the preciousness of the area under the xian formation. Chu Luiyue's gaze carefully swept across the profound formation, and he vaguely felt a few obscure yet valiant auras. That should be the elders in charge of patrolling. In the next moment, Elder Bo Yen flew down. Elder Wanjing patted Chu Luiyue's shoulder. "Let's go." Chu Luiyue nodded, and rushed down without hesitation. The three of them stood about 100 meters away from the silver profound formation. Standing there, Chu Luiyue could clearly feel the valiant pressure from the profound formation. "I wonder what the situation inside is like," Chu Luiyue thought to himself. Suddenly, an aura rapidly approached. A middle-aged man stepped out from behind the profound formation. "Bo Yen, Wanjing, why are you guys here?" This man was wearing a white robe, his figure was tall and skinny, and his eyes were sharp. When his gaze swept across them, it made them not dare to move. "Who is this? You guys even brought a brat here." Elder Bo Yen explained, "This is Chu Yu." After saying that, Chu Luiyue clearly saw a look of understanding flash across the other party's face. It seemed like he had long heard of her great name. Elder Bo Yen raised his chin, "This is Elder Yu Yu." Chu Luiyue inexplicably felt a little embarrassed, but he still bowed respectfully. "Student Chu Yu greets Elder Yu Yu. Chu Yu, this brat, has committed some crimes recently. Wanjing and I have discussed and decided to throw him here for a month to let him suffer a little and learn from his mistakes." Elder Bo Yen said very straightforwardly. Elder Yu Yu looked at Chu Luiyue with some surprise. What exactly did he do to end up in such a situation? Bo Yen usually wouldn't casually put someone here, let alone for a month. "How is your current strength?" Elder Yu Yu raised his chin and asked. "Take note, I asked all of it." Chu Luiyue paused, and said sincerely, "This student is currently at the middle of the 7th rank, 9th rank celestial physician, 9th rank Xian master." After saying that, the scene fell silent for a moment. The three elders looked at Chu Luiyue in unison. "Chu Yu, when did you break through to the 9th rank of the Xian master?" Elder Wanjing couldn't help but ask. Chu Luiyue blinked. "Just, not long ago." She originally didn't want to say this, but as a Xian master, Elder Yu Yu's eyesight was very good. She didn't dare to guarantee that if she lied now, she wouldn't be taught a lesson later. Moreover, from the fact that she could open the academy's barrier, he could basically guess this. Elder Wanjing's lips moved, but he didn't say anything. In the end, he glanced at Elder Bo Yen and snorted. "See that? This brat's strength was stronger than they expected." If something really happened to such a rare seedling, he definitely wouldn't let Bo Yen off. Not bad, you're quite honest. Elder Yu nodded. Go in. Digression, remember to watch the pinned event. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. It was silent and windless. She walked forward step by step. Occasionally, one could see the marks of magical beasts on the ground. The deeper she went, the tighter her muscles became, and her mind was highly focused. She paid full attention to every tiny sound and every subtle change in her surroundings. Along the way, she turned back to look once. Elder Yu didn't follow her. Obviously, they had made up their minds to let her do everything herself. Roar! Suddenly, a low and violent tiger roar came from the side of the mountain. Chu Luyue immediately turned to look. Separated by the dense forest, she couldn't see clearly what was going on. However, the powerful pressure contained in that roar caused her mind to go blank for a moment. That was an inestimable power. It was at least a 9th grade magical beast. Chu Luyue's heart instantly jumped. There were probably more than 1 or 2 magical beasts in this beast park. She took a deep breath and examined her surroundings more carefully before continuing forward. Swoosh! The sound of something piercing through the air could be heard. Chu Luyue's eyes sharpened, and she quickly dodged to the side. Thud! An extremely sharp grayish-brown steel needle stabbed into the spot where Chu Luyue was standing just now. The steel needle was thick at the top and sharp at the bottom. Its tip was about the size of an adult's pinky finger. The lower it went, the sharper it became. Because it was wrapped in a powerful force, the tip of the needle was still shaking slightly after it was inserted into the ground. And on the originally flat mountain ground, a few cracks suddenly appeared. This showed how powerful this thing was. If this needle were to hit her body, it would probably pierce through her flesh in an instant. But the key was that this wasn't a Yuan instrument. Because there were some fresh bloodstains on its tip, and if one looked carefully, there was a layer of fine hair on it. This was obviously, bang! 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 Heavy and majestic footsteps sounded, and the ground trembled. Chu Luyue's heart skipped a beat, and she stared in the direction of the sound. A huge figure gradually appeared in her line of sight. It was a wild beast that was brownish-black in color. It was tall and sturdy, with 4 strong legs, a silver horn on its head, and a string of steel needles on its back. This was the thing that was shot at Chu Luyue just now. Its orange-yellow eyes were cold and indifferent, and they were wrapped in a shocking pressure. Its huge feet stepped on the ground, and its sharp claws were clearly visible. There was no doubt that this foot could directly trample a person into meat paste. Chu Luyue's breathing stagnated. A 9th grade steel spine beast. She had only heard of this kind of magical beast in rumors. It was said that it was born as a 9th grade magical beast, and it was extremely strong. As it grew older, its body would rapidly expand. After it reached adulthood, it would break through the shackles and become a divine beast. It was said that the powerful god-tier steel spine beast's body was as heavy as a mountain. Wherever it went, it would be majestic. The steel needle-like thing on its back was one of its most basic trump cards. It was incomparably hard and extremely sharp. Most importantly, it contained a strong poison. Once injured, a 9th grade martial artist of the same level would die in less than an hour. This showed how powerful this steel spine beast was. And the one in front of her, although its body was huge, it hadn't broken through to the god tier and should still be considered a cub. Of course, even if it was a cub, its body was still terrifyingly huge. Chu Luyue stood in front of it, as small as an ant. She wasn't even as tall as one of its legs. Under such circumstances, if the other party wanted to directly trample her to death, it seemed to be only a matter of minutes. Both sides were in a stalemate. The steel-spine beast first glanced at the steel needle on the ground that had missed, as if it was somewhat dissatisfied that it didn't succeed. Then, its eyes turned and looked at Chu Luiyue. Cold. Awe-inspiring. That was the disdain and indifference based on its powerful strength. A strong killing intent appeared in its eyes. Bang! It raised its leg and took a step forward. Chapter 1255. The origin power in Chu Luiyue's body surged, and starlight flashed on her fingertips. She wouldn't use Scarlet Heaven's sword unless it was a critical moment. Although the steel spine beast in front of her was dangerous, with her current strength, she might not be a match for it. At the very least, escape was the best strategy. However, at this moment, a strange rustling sound suddenly came from behind her. Chu Luiyue didn't want to look back, but the sound was getting closer and closer, and it even carried a hint of danger. She had no choice but to be cautious. Thus, she turned her body sideways and quickly glanced in that direction. With this look, Chu Luiyue's pupils shrank, and her scalp went numb. Because what came from behind her was actually a group of snakes. Not just one, but a group of snakes entangled with each other. At a glance, there were at least 100 of them. These snakes were about the thickness of a thumb, and their bodies were colorful. Under the afterglow, they reflected a cold and magnificent light. However, at this moment, Chu Luiyue wasn't in the mood to appreciate it. Instead, her hair stood on end. Because each of these snakes was a 9th-grade magical beast, the triangular sword-toothed snake. The reason for this name was that their heads were flat and triangular. Every time they were in attack mode, 2 sharp sword-shaped teeth would be exposed, flickering with a cold white light. Of course, they were also poisonous. Their toxicity was stronger than that of the steel spine beast. At this moment, they were in groups and were heading toward Chu Luiyue. Wherever they passed, the ground would emit a faint rustling sound. She didn't feel it earlier, but after seeing their true appearance and hearing this sound, Chu Luiyue felt her whole body go numb. Now, she was attacked from 2 sides, and she couldn't advance or retreat. In front of her was the steel spine beast, and behind her was the triangular sword-toothed snake. No matter which one it was, she didn't have full confidence that she could finish them off or repel them without getting injured. Chu Luiyue clearly felt her whole body stiffen. If Dumpling was here now, these problems could be easily solved. After all, it was a red-tailed phoenix with a noble bloodline. Even if it only relied on this layer of natural bloodline suppression, it would be able to subdue these guys. But now, how could she beat them all by herself? At this moment, Chu Luiyue finally understood why Elder Wanjing was so against this punishment when Elder Bo Yen suggested it. She recalled the meaningful look in Elder Wanjing's eyes before she left. At that time, she had naively thought that it was because he couldn't bear to part with her, but now it seemed that he was clearly worried about her little life. Beast Park, Beast Park. Chu Luiyue crazily thought about how to solve her current predicament as she circulated all the strength in her body. But before she could figure it out, the steel spine beast turned around and raised its foot to step on her. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1256. Chu Luiyue almost cursed out loud. This triangular sword-teethed snake was too useless. They were so brave just a moment ago. The steel spine beast had only launched a probing attack, and they actually retreated just like that. This decision was made too hastily. Chu Luiyue simply couldn't understand. Although the triangular sword-teethed snake's individual combat power couldn't compare to the steel spine beast, they had the advantage in numbers. They didn't even have a friendly spar. Wasn't this too cowardly? She didn't have time to think too much. Seeing the steel spine beast charging straight at her, she quickly dodged to the side. Bam! The steel spine beast stomped heavily on the ground. A rather deep pit appeared on the originally flat ground. Several cracks quickly spread out in all directions. Chu Luiwei randomly chose a direction with dense forest and quickly headed forward. She had already entered the beast park. Danger lurked in all directions. It didn't matter which direction she went. The most important thing now was to get rid of the steel spine beast as soon as possible. The denser the forest, the more advantageous it was for her. Chu Luiwei's movements were nimble. In the blink of an eye, her figure had disappeared into the lush forest. Roar! The steel spine beast raised its head and roared. The trees that were relatively close to him were crushed by this pressure and actually directly exploded. The steel spine beast lifted its leg and ran in the direction of Chu Luiwei. As for the triangular sword-teethed snake, after retreating for a distance, it suddenly dispersed. Hundreds of snakes scattered in all directions. Their bodies were very small. Once they burrowed into the grass, they could hide perfectly. Therefore, after dispersing, they burrowed into the forest and hid themselves. There was only the extremely subtle sound of snake scales sliding across the ground. It was occasionally audible, but it also disappeared very quickly. Chu Luiwei used her full speed to escape forward. She leaped and jumped like a mountain elf. Her figure was faintly discernible in the forest. But even so, she couldn't successfully shake off the steel spine beast that was chasing after her. Its destructive power was even more terrifying than Chu Luiwei had expected. She originally thought that by relying on these dense trees, she could form an obstacle to the steel spine beast and slow it down. But in reality, the steel spine beast didn't care about this at all. Its physical strength was extremely strong. Everywhere it passed, it destroyed everything in its path. Thus, one man and one beast, one at the front and one at the back, began to compete in the forest. Elder Yu stood with his hands behind his back and waited at the foot of the mountain for a while. Even if he didn't see it for himself, he could roughly guess what had happened from the changes in the energy fluctuations. He couldn't help but snort. It seemed like Chu Yu was already entangled. He didn't know how long this kid could last. One had to know that in this place, apart from the cubs, the lowest level of adult magical beasts was level 9. They were not easy to deal with. Furthermore, in order to nurture and stimulate the abilities of these magical beasts to the greatest extent, there was basically no one in the entire beast park other than a few elders who were in charge of maintenance and patrolling. These demonic beasts were especially sensitive to the aura of humans, and they were born with a strong desire to attack. Chu Yu's talent and strength were not bad, but he was still a child in the end. He was no match for these magical beasts. Let's hope this kid can survive the night. He glanced at the setting sun and shook his head with a smile. The sky quickly darkened. The forest was shady, and the lighting was even worse. As Chu Luiwei ran forward, she secretly thought of other ways. This couldn't go on. She couldn't shake off the steel spine beasts with her own strength. Furthermore, as time passed, her physical strength was rapidly depleting, and her speed inevitably decreased. However, the steel spine beasts seemed to be getting braver as they fought. They were born to be good at fighting, and their explosive power and endurance were extremely strong. Chu Luiwei was really worried that they would drag her to her death in the end. It wasn't that she didn't think of fighting the steel spine beasts head-on. In fact, she had already accumulated her strength and was prepared at the beginning. However, when she saw the triangular sword-toothed snakes choose to retreat, she hesitated. To be able to make them so fearful was enough to prove the power of these steel spine beasts. Although she could fight against a level 8 warrior now, she could only lose in front of a level 9 warrior. Moreover, level 9 warriors of the same level were far inferior to level 9 magical beasts in terms of combat strength. After thinking about it, it wasn't feasible to use force. She had to think of other ways. However, this steel spine beast kept chasing after her relentlessly. She didn't even have a chance to breathe, so what other good ideas could she have? Suddenly, Chu Luiyue felt a warning in her heart. Her mind was highly tense, and she immediately forced herself to stop. Previously, she had been moving forward at high speed. Now that she suddenly stopped, it caused the blood in her lungs to churn. However, she couldn't care less about this now. Because, danger was ahead. Bang! The sound of heavy footsteps could be heard. This sound was somewhat familiar. It was very similar to the footsteps of the steel spine beasts, but it was several times heavier. This time, she clearly hadn't seen the other party's shadow, but Chu Luiyue felt that the other party had directly stepped on her heart. She stood on a tree and held onto the tree trunk with one hand. Her entire body was tense, and she almost suffocated. The next moment, a figure that was like a small mountain appeared in front of her. With just a glance, Chu Luiyue immediately recognized that this was also a steel spine beast. Moreover, its body size was several times that of the previous one. This was definitely an adult steel spine beast. It was walking towards her. Trees fell and rocks shattered. For a moment, Chu Luiyue almost suspected that this mountain might be flattened by it. Bang! 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 Suddenly, for some reason, the steel spine beast behind her suddenly sped up. Roar! This cry was very different from the previous one. It lacked the cold and dignified aura and had a hint of joy and coquettishness. And this was clearly aimed at the steel spine beast that had just appeared opposite them. Chu Luiyue hurriedly turned back to take a look, and her heart immediately turned cold. These two seemed to be mother and son. Then what other way did she have to leave this place safely and unharmed? Her hands were tightly clasped on the tree trunk, and her knuckles turned white. Because of the long run, she had consumed a lot of strength. At this time, her forehead was already covered with fine beads of sweat, and her back was almost drenched. I can't go on like this, Chu Luiyue gritted her teeth. If I'm really forced into a desperate situation, then I have no choice but to show my trump card. Boom! The steel spine beast cub rushed over and directly hit the tree Chu Luiyue was on. The tree, which was as thick as two people hugging it, instantly collapsed. Chu Luiyue tiptoed and was about to fly up. However, the steel spine beast seemed to have expected it and directly pounced over. Chapter 1257. If this stomp landed, Chu Luiyue would probably become a pile of minced meat on the spot. Chu Luiyue's mind raced, and a biting cold aura gathered in her palm. However, just as that kick was about to land and Chu Luiyue was about to fight to the death, the adult steel spine beast that was originally standing opposite suddenly rushed over and knocked the steel spine beast to the ground with its head. Bang! The steel spine beast cub's heavy body flew out, and the trees along the way fell one after another. After dragging for a long distance, it finally stopped. There was a deep rut left on the ground, and gravel and broken wood were scattered everywhere. It was a mess. Chu Luiyue was dumbfounded. The steel spine beast cub that was sent flying was also dumbfounded. The surroundings were silent. Chu Luiyue stiffened her neck and looked at the adult steel spine beast standing beside her. What's going on? Why is it helping me? Could it be that the steel spine beast cub isn't its? But soon, she dispelled this guess. Because after the steel spine beast cub came back to its senses, it didn't get up and just wailed. Roar! Chu Luiyue subconsciously looked back and saw it lying on the ground, looking at the adult steel spine beast in disbelief. Its eyes were filled with grievance and pity. Roar, roar. The next moment, Chu Luiyue clearly saw a layer of mist quickly accumulating in the cub's lantern-like eyes. Drip. Drip. Fist-sized teardrops kept falling and hitting the ground, creating small puddles. Chu Luiyue, if it weren't for my parents, it probably wouldn't have such a reaction. However, this cub didn't seem to be very well received. Because when the adult steel spine beast saw it crying, not only did it not comfort it, but it also walked over and kicked it. The cub didn't expect his parents to be so ruthless to him. He didn't pay attention and was kicked out again. The crying stopped abruptly, and then it rolled a few more times. Perhaps it was because the steelback beast was naturally thick-skinned, so it didn't show any mercy this time. The sound of flesh and bones being kicked made Chu Luiyue's eyes twitch. I really didn't expect things to develop in this direction. Roar. The adult steelback beast roared at the cub, sounding a little strict. The cub had suffered a loss and learned its lesson. Finally, it no longer dared to cause trouble. It put away its previous temper and obediently admitted its mistake. The adult steel spine beast roared again. It was unknown what it said, but the cub suddenly raised its head. A look of shock flashed across its eyes. Then, it glanced at Chu Luiyue and shook its head frantically. Roar! The adult steel spine beast let out another roar, causing the cub to pause and immediately become obedient. Chu Luiyue stood aside awkwardly. Why did it seem like he was the one who got into a fight with the other party's child, but after the other party's parents came, not only did they not blame him, they even lectured his child. Wasn't the quality of this adult steel spine beast a little too high? Chu Luiyue originally wanted to leave. However, considering that he couldn't even compare to the cub's speed, he definitely had no chance against this adult steel spine beast. He might as well stay here and see what the other party's attitude was. After waiting for a while, the two steel spine beasts finally finished their conversation. Of course, this conversation was only the adult steel spine beast teaching the cub a lesson. Bang! The adult steel spine beast walked over. The cub followed behind dejectedly. Chu Luiyue's heart tightened. It's here. She subconsciously straightened her back and looked up. It couldn't be helped. The other party was too big. Chu Luiyue could only see the other party's thigh. The adult steel spine beast stood not far in front of her. On the other hand, the cub moved over step by step. Anyone could see that its face was full of reluctance. As if disdaining its slow movements, the adult steel spine beast behind it raised its leg and kicked its butt again. Ugh! The cub almost flew up from the kick and subconsciously turned its head. It originally wanted to protest, but when it met the pair of intimidating eyes, it immediately stopped. After hesitating for a while, it only let out a low sound from its throat, which sounded very pitiful. The adult steel spine beast was unmoved and raised its head. The cub could only retract its gaze and walk over to Chu Luiyue step by step. The human and beast looked at each other. The cub glared at Chu Luiyue and then lowered its head, aggrieved. Chu Luiyue was still confused when she saw the steel spine beast cub's head stretch out in front of her. The silver horn was not far in front of her. She could reach it by raising her hand. Chu Luiyue was stunned for a moment, then suddenly understood something. This is an apology. As soon as this guess appeared, Chu Luiyue subconsciously wanted to deny it. Because this was simply too absurd. One had to know that a moment ago, she was being chased by this steel spine beast with nowhere to run and almost died at its feet. And now, not only did it stop attacking, but it was also apologizing so humbly. This was simply too shocking. However, other than this reason, Chu Luiyue could not think of any other explanation. She looked at the adult steel spine beast behind her in a daze. She saw that pair of eyes. Deep, dignified, but with a trace of undetectable nostalgia. Chu Luiyue suddenly felt an extremely familiar feeling in her heart. This steel-spine beast, she opened her mouth, but no words came out. A bold idea quickly flashed through her mind. Perhaps she had met it long ago. As if sensing her emotional fluctuations, the steel-backed beast finally came forward. It looked into Chu Luiyue's eyes and lowered its head. Unfortunately, it was still too tall. Even if Chu Luiyue raised her hand, she couldn't reach it. After realizing this, it blinked and half-knelt without any hesitation. Then, it moved forward, gentle and dependent. Chu Luiyue felt something rush out from the bottom of her heart. She subconsciously reached out and stroked its head. The steel-spine beast's skin and flesh were very rough and hard. It felt like touching a piece of iron. But for some reason, Chu Luiyue's heart softened. Suddenly, her gaze focused and she saw that there seemed to be a scar on the steel-spine beast's horn. It looked like someone had cut it with a sharp weapon, about half an inch long. It was difficult to notice from afar, but standing close, it was clearly visible. Chu Luiyue subconsciously touched it. In an instant, images rushed out from her mind. She frowned and almost fell to the ground. The steel-spine beast looked at her worriedly. Chu Luiyue closed her eyes and took a step forward, leaning closer to it. The steel-spine beast let her hug it without moving. The cub watched from the side, not knowing what to do. After a long time, Chu Luiyue sighed softly. Ah, Cheong, I'm back. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 1258. Ever since she knew that she had lost a part of her memory, Chu Luiyue started to think of all sorts of ways to make herself remember. Previously, she had tried many methods and experienced a lot of torture, but most of the time, it was futile. She couldn't remember no matter how hard she tried. She didn't remember how she came to the Divine Ruins world. She didn't know how she got first place on the Green Cloud roll. She didn't know what she had done in Lingxiao College and why she had forgotten everything in the end. Many times, she even felt that what she did was meaningless. Since the fog was already there and she couldn't see clearly, wouldn't it be better if she didn't look at it? But now, she finally realized that it wasn't meaningless. Because what was behind the fog was the scenery that she couldn't bear to forget. Just like now, she suddenly remembered some of the things that happened in the Beast Park. Even though her memory was still incomplete and not very clear, but it was still very precious to her. Ah, Cheong. Chu Luiyue took a deep breath and hid the tears in her eyes. She hugged it tightly, then let go of her hand and took a few steps back. She carefully sized it up and smiled brightly. Ah, Cheong, you've grown up. A few years ago, when they first met in the Beast Park, it wasn't much older than the cub next to it. She didn't expect it to be an adult now and even have a child. Ah, Cheong intimately rubbed against her palm and stood up. Its eyes were filled with joy and excitement. Actually, at the beginning, it wasn't too sure about Chu Luiyue's identity, so it had a cautious attitude. But now, it could finally be at ease. Oh. The cub, who had been ignored for a long time, finally found a chance to interrupt. Its eyes moved back and forth between Chu Luiyue and its mother, full of confusion and confusion. Obviously, it had been ignorant until now. It was clearly its mother's son. Why did its mother treat this human who suddenly appeared better than it did itself? Chu Luiyue looked at its jealous and angry expression and couldn't help but laugh. Don't worry, I won't snatch your mother. The cub's eyes were full of suspicion. Not snatching. Then why was its mother so good to it? And she even hugged her mother just now. Not to mention that her mother had hit it for the first time because of her. It was very angry, and the consequences were very serious. Thus, it went to its mother's side and rubbed itself against her like a spoiled child, looking at her with eager eyes. Let her go. Let her go. Let her go. Bang! Its body was once again kicked away by its mother. Roar! I can't live like this anymore, woo-woo. Chu Liuyue's eyebrows twitched slightly. Ah, Cheong, you're a mother now. Why hasn't your temper changed at all? He's your son after all, ao. Exactly. To think that even this human would say something like that. Mother sure is ruthless. Ah, Cheong glanced at it. Digression, I apologize to everyone again. Yesterday, there was a blunder. I originally planned to refund everyone's Xiaoxiang dollars, but because there were many subscription platforms, Hongshou, QQ, and other readers couldn't refund them one by one. So, in the end, I replaced the repeated chapter with today's first update. Those who have subscribed can continue to read as usual. I'm really sorry for causing trouble for everyone. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.